い全国大会目指して頑張ってみたいかあの若い頃の気持ちを取り落とせたら良いのにもしよろしければ行きましょうかねまりがまう街にその時間楽しい年に行くもしかして知ってるのやのととすがり出会うやなものって答えそうかもしれない知りて素晴らしいものそれは救いの旅路だ我々の忘れおいでこれは愛の告白願って忘れましょう成長の苦悩世界を恋になり雨のアウハウと叫んで気合い入れよう恋の願うの今日の今日のベケーション今日
Hello and welcome to Japanimation Station's Kyoto Vacation, an anime podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I am Sean Chapman,
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
and we are here to kick back, relax, and talk about some anime. This week on the show, we have a special episode for all of you because we are here to talk about the most action-packed, on the edge of your seats animated film ever made. That's right. This ain't your grandma's K-On!, this is K-On!, the movie.
Eat your heart out, Dragon Ball, Gundam, the Demon Slayer Mugen Train, all y'all. Nothing is as exciting as watching the K-On! Girls go to London for a vacation and bumble around for a while and then come home and sing a song.
Yes, 2 hours about going to London, and that's what I needed. So we're talking about the finale of K-On! As it exists in anime, of course. This is K-On! The movie, or if you want to literally translate the title from Japanese, it's just movie K-On!, which I love. I love this. That's the order of it. It's just Eiga, K-On!, movie K-On!. Here you go.
Which, for those who don't know, that's very unusual, because usually you would go Gekijoban, which is like theatrical edition, and then the movie. So Demon Slayer, the movie, is Gekijoban, Kimetsu no Yaiba, Mugen Train. And that's like very standard. So you would expect it to be Gekijoban K-On!, but it's not. It's Eiga, which is just the plain flat word for movie. It literally is moving picture. And I love that. Just Eiga, K-On!, which is pretty great. Although I also Gekijoban is too formal of a term for this film. We just give it to you straight. It's just this is a fucking movie. This is movie K-On!. Here you go. I also would have appreciated it if they had just called it K-On! With 3 exclamation points, because that would have been pretty great.
Yes, that would have also been phenomenal. But yes, this is K-On! The movie, which is a story, kind of like, it's an interesting thing, because it's effectively not like a sequel or a finale to K-On! As such. It's more like a companion to the ending. It's kind of how I think about this movie, because it takes place basically mostly in the gaps between episode 22 and 23 of season 2, and then it goes up to showing you the ending from the TV show from a slightly different perspective, where it's like a different version of the ending of the TV show in terms of episode 24, which makes it a very interesting kind of different sort of film. Because it's not trying to be a finale movie or something like that, which is a thing you get sometimes for these kinds of shows. It is trying to be, let's take the essence of K-On!, give it to you in movie form. What that means is we get to send a bunch of the staff to London so that they can go to like location scout and take a bunch of reference footage and photos and stuff. And then we just get to do that. And that's really where the movie budget goes to for this. Is obviously the animation looks amazing. But the thing that makes this a movie as opposed to the TV show, I think, is entirely the London stuff. But everything else about it is about trying to deliver that sort of same heart and warmth and humor and perspective on storytelling that the show has, and just give it to you in movie form, not about trying to sort of take the story to different or further places or anything like that. But it is a delightful movie that I've loved for a long time, but have never actually sat down and watched it front to back because I'd never actually finished season 2 before now. So I have seen large chunks of this movie in clip form on YouTube, but I had never actually sat down to watch the whole thing and I love it.
I was in awe of this thing. This is probably my favorite K-On! Thing. Like, it is just, as a 2-hour concentrated blast of K-On!, it is beyond perfect. And I was very curious how they would do a movie for this show specifically, because nothing about K-On! Feels, the TV show feels like it lends itself to a movie, really. Like, the way, like, Haruhi, it's not hard to imagine, because there are multiple arcs of Haruhi you could just edit into movie form, right? Even Clannad, there's parts of Clannad you could do a movie edit of or something, right? But K-On! Is so light, and it is so... it's, again, as we talked about last week, it's not that it is plotless, but its plots are more internal, and they are more light, and they are more atmospheric. And so with a movie, you can't make it too plot-heavy or big, or else it ceases to be K-On!, right? But you also can't keep it too loose, or else then it feels like a big TV episode and not a movie. And I think for this film, they found, like, exactly the right balance, where there's a slightly more cinematically scoped story to be told, both in terms of where they are going, big trip to London, but also I think some of the, like, story they're telling with the 5 girls that just has a little bit more time to breathe in a 110-minute movie. But then it is all being told in your typically loose and atmospheric K-On! Fashion, where, like, it takes half an hour for them to even decide where they're going, which in most movies is not how you would do it. And so I think it just strikes the perfect balance. And then on top of that, it is the most lushly, lavishly animated thing I've maybe ever seen. It's just incredible. I know I'm being hyperbolic, but like from when you guys are listening to this, a couple months ago, Hayao Miyazaki's new movie came out, The Boy and the Heron, and I remember saying when I saw that might be the most lavish animated movie I've ever seen. And there were parts with K-On!, and this probably isn't actually true, but there were parts where I was looking at it and going, is this the most lavish animated movie I've ever seen? Because, like, the amount of detail on the backgrounds and every character movement, it's insane, because K-On! As a TV show already looks like a movie, frankly. Like, it is so beautifully animated and, like, fully animated. But then you look at this movie, and it's just on another level from anything we've seen from Kyoto Animation so far. Because even the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya looks more like the TV show than this one does. It's insane. It really blew me away and made me laugh extremely hard all the way through.
Yeah, I think it is, the show for K-On! Has such a kind of detail-oriented style for its animation, by which I mean, like, it focuses in on little minute details of movement and the background and stuff like that. Has always been part of, like, K-On!'s whole thing, because most of the show is just people hanging out in their club room chatting. So if you're taking the tremendous talents of the staff at KyoAni and applying it to a show that's what's going on, well, they're going to take their talent, they're going to fill in all the edges of that. And that means focusing on the little details of the expressions and the movements of characters and how their hair moves, how they play their instruments, all the little, like, things of photos in the background or text on the whiteboard and the doodles that Yui makes and all that kind of stuff. It's all over the show. But for the movie, it's obviously, it gets to be heightened because you have that movie level production and budget and time to apply. And so that means every frame, every little piece of this movie is just packed with so much detail and well-observed elements. And I think that is particularly heightened when you get to all the London stuff, which is one of the most fun I've had taking screenshots from my notes, was just going through with a fine-tooth comb and screenshotting all the stuff in the montages in London, because the detail they have of all the random stores and the signage and the ephemera of the world of London from K-On!'s kind of perspective is so intoxicatingly executed. It's just fascinating. So yeah, I agree with you that whether it's like absolutely the most lushly animated movie I've ever made or whatever, it is in that conversation, right? It is like one of the most impressive feats of sort of like design and animation I've seen in anything, which, of course it is, because it is a KyoAni film and is a K-On! Movie, but it is very awe-inspiring when you sit down and really take it all in, especially when you have it on home video and you have it on really high quality. You're not having to like look at it through streaming and stuff like that. It really stands out how just exquisite the visual construction of this movie is.
Yeah, I mean, because also this is the first KyoAni movie we've seen that was planned as a movie from the beginning, because Disappearance of Haruhi was planned as episodes of the TV show. And so, again, that movie is utterly gorgeous, but I don't think it's like an enormous leap over the show because, again, it didn't really need to be, and it was kind of planned and storyboarded initially as part of the show. This was, we're making a K-On! Movie, and so, like, there's a level of ambition in some of the shots they're doing. This is the most CGI we've ever seen from KyoAni, and it's not like UFO table levels of ambitious and well integrated, but it is like notable for a studio that just doesn't do that much, and interesting to see. And then again, very well done. And yeah, the Blu-ray, we just have the Sentai Filmworks Blu-ray that's in the big box set. It's one of like the best looking movie Blu-rays I've ever seen. It looks incredible. Just also notably up over the TV show. So yeah, I had so much fun watching this. I'm home for the holidays right now, so my brother Thomas, who's been watching all these shows along with us and helping us behind the scenes with some podcast stuff, he had just caught up on K-On!, so we watched it together, and that was very fun. Because as hard as I think I would have laughed at this alone, you laugh even harder when we're all chuckling at, Yui trying to speak English or whatever happens. It's amazing.
This movie is... it just has some of my favorite comedy bits in any anime thing ever. I know that for sure because some of them I have been watching for years on YouTube, and it just keeps on popping up in my YouTube recommendations. I'm like, I'll watch this 50-second clip from the K-On! Movie again because I have nothing. There's no better use of 50 seconds in my life than watching one of the girls from K-On! Try to speak English. That's the most productive use of my time at any given point in my life, and I 100% earnestly believe that.
I'm just imagining you on your deathbed and the priest comes in to give last rites and you're like, no, I don't need that. Show me Yui trying to order on the airplane.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what will happen to me.
Okay.
But let's because it's not just us that like this movie, Jonathan.
Right.
Because this movie is also very remarkable for its impact, I think, in terms of like animated films in Japan, particularly for this sphere, right? We have to keep in mind that K-On! Is a late night anime. It is not, it does not exist in the normal sphere of anime that would get a movie like this in the first place. And it's pretty fascinating when you dig into the reception for this movie. So let's get into some of this, the history before we dive deeper into the film. So the K-On! Movie, this movie was originally teased on the official website when the final episode of season 2 aired, right? So obviously this movie was sort of conceptualized in pre-production while they were making the second season, which makes sense because there are lots of hooks in the second season into this movie, especially when they make the OVA. And then during the second K-On! Live event, which was K-On! Live event, Come With Me, at the Saitama Super Arena, which was held on February 20th, 2011, there, Yamada Naoko, the director, announced the official release date of the movie and some of the details of like this movie would be taking place during the events of season 2. That Saitama Super Arena concert also is pretty crazy because I've seen some footage from it now, and it is fucking wild. Like, because Saitama Super Arena is huge, and that arena was fucking packed, and it is crazy just to see this, like, for such a sort of unassuming, quaint TV show in terms of the content, just like this huge mass of people all at this giant like live event. It's pretty fun. I'd recommend people looking up some footage of it. In late April, this is 7 months before the movie debuted, that was when they started their first promotional campaign for selling, pre-ordering tickets, basically. So it was announced that there would be 40,000 advanced tickets sold that would have bonus promotional goods. Because this is a late-night anime movie, I mean, it was like merchandised up the fucking wahoo with weird, like, oh, if you pre-order at this venue, you can get like a random key holder of one of the 5 girls and all that kind of stuff. This is the first time they sold advanced tickets. It was a 40,000 ticket lot, and that was sold out within 3 days. On opening night, there was a special event held at the Shinjuku Piccadilly Theater, where the voice actors in Yamada Naoko, if you have the Sentai Filmworks Blu-ray set, the opening greetings from this debut is on that Blu-ray, on the special bonus Blu-ray. The venue only seats 1,000 people, but that event was flooded with over 100,000 applicants who wanted to attend it. So obviously people wanted to go see the K-On! The movie. K-On! The movie debuted in theaters in Japan on December 3rd, 2011. And part of the promotion of the movie was that date, 12/3. So as 1, 2, 3 is K-On! Was kind of how they promoted the film. The movie was initially screened in 137 theaters around Japan. This is an exceptionally large number for a film of this type. For comparison, The Melancholy of Suzumiya Haruhi started with a very limited release of only 24 theaters, and then slowly that movie expanded to ultimately having shown in 103 theaters by its end. Also, for a comparison point, the first Gintama movie, which came out a bit before K.O. the movie, the first Gintama movie was April 2010. That movie was in 90 theaters. So 137 for a film like this is a big number. And that's just the initial sort of allotment they had. The movie proved extremely popular, and after January 2012, more theaters around Japan began screening the film. And by April 2012, it was estimated that about twice that number of 137 had screened the film. So eventually everyone wants to show K-On! The movie. The film finished its normal run on March 30th when the Shinjuku Piccadilly Theater showed its final screening, but there were still reports of different random theaters around Japan continuing to do various revival showings and stuff like that as late as July of 2012. At the Tokyo Tachikawa Cinema City Theater, they implemented special live-style, quote-unquote, screenings where audiences were encouraged to participate by standing up, dancing, singing along, and stuff like that, as if they were the audience for a live music concert rather than a movie. These screenings proved extremely popular, so much so that a special reprise of this event was done over 1 year after the movie finished its theatrical run. By September, the film had started limited screenings overseas in places such as Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Australia. And then also, I love this, Yamada Naoko attended a special screening that was held in Scotland, which was the first screening in Europe. And I love the idea that there's someone who, in September 2012, there are Scottish people that got to see Yamada Naoko present for the movie, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of the gross, on opening, or I guess like the opening weekend, the movie made 316 million yen, which is about 2.2 million US dollars, and ultimately made about 1.9 billion yen in its theatrical run, which is about 13 million US dollars. This put it at the 19th highest grossing film of 2012 in the Japanese box office, also making it the highest grossing film distributed by Shochiku, the old, like, long existing Japanese film production and distribution company. Shochiku had a bunch of flops recently, so I found a news article that actually called this movie Shochiku's Savior, because they had a bunch of notable flops, and this movie did extremely well.
And you meant it's the highest grossing from those couple of years, not ever.
Not ever. Yes. Yeah. From around that time period of the 2010s.
Still, it's super impressive, but Shochiku's been around for over 100 years, so.
yes. Thanks for putting that into perspective. To put the gross of the whole film into perspective, like, what does this mean? This is about twice the gross of what Disappearance of Suzumiya Haruhi made. And Suzumiya Haruhi was itself, when we talked about that movie was considered a massive outlier in terms of the amount of success it had for a film based on a late night niche anime, because late night anime basically means niche anime in and of itself. It grossed comparably to The Dark Knight Rises, which was also 2012 in terms of the gross for this movie. Obviously, it came out originally 2011, but so late 2011 that you're looking at it compared to 2012 films mostly. The Dark Knight Rises, it did better than that. It outgrossed that year's Naruto movie, which was Road to Ninja, which is one of the better Naruto movies, I'll say. That had a 1.5 billion yen gross. It substantially outperformed Steven Spielberg's The Adventures of Tintin, which had debuted the same week in Japan. That had a 1 billion yen gross. And so the only animated films that do better than K-On! Are kind of your expected things. It's Pokemon, the Pokemon movie that year, Doraemon movie, and Detective Conan movie that year. Those three franchises always put out one of the highest grossing movies of that year in Japan's box office. In 2012, you also had Mamoru Hosoda's Wolf Children that outgrossed K-On! The movie, and then the third Eva rebuild that outgrossed K-On! The movie. But anything that's not of that like caliber or that like standard is not getting anywhere close to the gross of something like K-On! The movie. Like even the Pretty Cure or Precure movie from that year, I think that did about 1 billion yen. So this is outperforming like other really notable franchises, just not Pokemon,
Right. Well, and Pokemon movies, Naruto movies, they're also going to have like bigger releases in more theaters and more promotion and that kind of stuff. Although I said Naruto there, it outgrossed the Naruto movie. So, hey, that's crazy.
Yes, it is. It is punching well above its rate of the in terms of the kinds of movies you would be comparing this movie to normally. Like, for instance, it was a lot easier for me to find, if you're wondering, like, why is Sean's comparisons of the gross here a lot more detailed than Disappearance of Suzumiya Haruhi? It's just a lot easier to find information about it because it did so well that it's like, it's not, I don't have to go digging for these reference points because it's on lists of the best grossing movies of that year to make it very easy to find some of this data. According to a survey by the PIA Global Entertainment Corporation, K-On! The movie received the highest satisfaction amongst audiences for movies that opening weekend. This is like equivalent of like the cinema score over here, beating out the movie Railways and, as I mentioned, Adventures of Tintin. So people liked it better than the other movies that came out that weekend. And then overall, the only other movie I've found, looking through all the lists of like highest grossing animated movies and stuff in Japan, the only other movie that has similar conditions to K-On!, meaning that it's like a late night anime and all that kind of stuff, the only movie that performs similarly is 2013's Madoka Magica Rebellion, the third Madoka Magica movie, which is the one that advances the story from the TV show, because the first two are recap movies. That's the only one and it grosses almost the exact same amount as K-On! The movie. There's not actually been anything since, unless because it's like, depends on how you classify something like Jujutsu Kaisen Zero, but I wouldn't even really, that's not a late night anime. So
that's a big shonen anime. Like,
yes.
There's so much precedent for movies like Jujutsu Kaisen Zero. It was like huge and historic in some of its box office records, but in a way you would expect for a movie of its genre.
Yes, there's just like nothing else since other than Madoka Magica has kind of replicated what K-On! Did here. It was also nominated for the Best Animated Feature at the 2012 Japanese Academy Awards. Although using the word nominated, I'm like, this is like a weird translation thing where the way these award shows work in Japan, it's not you nominate and then you lose. It's everybody gets an award and then one thing gets the top award is how that's actually phrased, just for reference there. But the movie that won the top award for that year, the 2012 Japanese Academy Awards for Best Animated Film, was Studio Ghibli's From Up on the Poppy Hill. So that was, the other stuff it was competing with.
I just also want to say, I love you, Studio Ghibli. I like that movie quite a bit. That's fucking crazy. K-On! The movie is much better than From Up on Poppy Hill. I think Studio Ghibli has a little bit of the Disney Pixar effect at those awards. Yes. It tends to win every time it's up. And a lot of the time, very deservingly so, unlike Disney. But in this case, I'm sorry, K-On! Was the better animated movie that year.
Yes, you're right. That it's almost always Studio Ghibli or maybe a Mamoru Hosoda movie. Like, that's kind of like the two that will typically win that. And it is the first film based on a late night anime to get that nomination if you disregard EVA. I do love that when I look up all these kinds of things, I find lots of websites describing in superlatives how well K-On! The movie did, but you always have to put in EVA's its own thing. Because technically EVA was a late night anime, but obviously at a certain point, it's kind of its own entity. K-On! Won Best Film in the 2012 New Type Magazine Anime Awards, which incidentally, Fate Zero was the winner of the TV show award for that year as well, so that's a good year.
I think New Type called it right on both counts. That's pretty good.
And so that's all the box office kind of stuff. But then, as expected, of course, the real money is when you get to gouge people for the home video release and how absurdly expensive they are. Because it was something like, I think, 90,000 yen or something about that for the home Blu-ray.
That's pretty standard for like a movie's limited edition. Obviously, there would be a cheaper normal edition as well. But yeah, 90,000 to like 110,000, that's pretty standard. Like, I was just looking at like Makoto Shinkai's movie Suzume on Blu-ray over in Japan, and that's like 120,000 for the 4K. So that's how it goes. Yeah, it's standard over there. It's inconceivably expensive relative to American standards for these kinds of things. The limited edition Blu-ray sold 96,000 copies in its first week, becoming the best-selling K-On! Video release by a fucking country mile. I mean, it sold twice as much in its first week as the previous best-selling volume from the TV show. So, it just sold like fucking gangbusters. It was obviously the best-selling volume for that week on the Oricon charts. And at that point, it became the best-selling anime movie Blu-ray of 2012 and the fourth best-selling Blu-ray overall of the year. And by the end of 2012, all combined, if you combine the Blu-ray and the DVD sales, K-On! The movie sold 220,000 copies, which is a lot. That is a fucking lot for these kinds of like that's where I'm having to double check
my numbers, because for people who don't know Japanese numbers are frustrating if you're coming from English, because they're kind of off by 1 0 point because of how they sort of count things. And I kept on looking at that and be like, is it supposed to be... I mean, it has to be 220,000, right? But there have been a lot of times where I've had to double check where my zeros are because I've almost messed up when I put in numbers in my notes. I'm like, nope, it's 220,000, not 22,000. That's a lot of these movies that they sold.
Speaking of where the zeros is, just before we get a comment on this, we were wrong on yen just a second ago. You said 90,000. I said 120,000. Take off a zero. It's 9,000, 1,200. 9,000 yen would be $90. 90,000 yen would be $900. No Blu-ray costs $900 in Japan.
Yes.
But, well, some complete series sets might.
Yes.
You're
right.
That's not out of the realm of possibility, but we meant 9,000. So before we get a comment on that, there you go.
Yes, because that's where it happens. It's both the zero is off by 1 because you're looking at mon or oku in Japanese in terms of the number counting, and then the yen to dollar conversion is off by 2 places, and so your brain gets completely fucked up trying to convert numbers, and it always drives me crazy. Especially for this one, because I had to start looking at oku. 19 oku yen is what you'd say in Japanese, and I don't really have to deal with that. I don't have to think about fucking numbers that high almost ever, because we haven't talked about anything yet in Japanimation Station where I had to look at oku as a number. So needless to say, movie K-On! Did extremely well, both critically and commercially. Just sort of a more or less at the time unprecedented kind of movie. And since then, there's only been one other movie, that Madoka Magica movie, that sort of is similar in terms of how it performed relative to the kind of movie it is. So K-On! The movie, it's fucking crazy.
And I also think, like, if you compare it, like the, asterisk you kept giving of, like, if you don't count Eva, one thing to note about Eva is a big action series that you can cut, like, a much sexier trailer for than K-On! The movie. Madoka Magica is a more plot-heavy sort of thing, right?
Oh, yes.
And so I do think it's also interesting that it's this success for something that, again, they didn't go crazy and do the K-On! Movie where they play Budokan or something, right? They didn't, like, completely, I feel like, sell out what K-On! Is to make a big popular movie. They made a big popular movie based on K-On!, which was already big and popular. So that also I just think is worth noting and is very cool.
Yes, yeah, because certainly if you're taking into account the genre and not the sort of like where the source material comes from, if you're taking into account the genre, there's nothing even remotely similar to it that has performed like this. I mean, nothing even close. The only other stuff would be the Idol-style series since then, but something like the Love Live School Idol Festival movie, which is very much made in the model of K-On! The movie, because that one, the girls all go to New York City for their big trip. Like, it just doesn't even register as a blip on the radar relative to how K-On! The movie performs. So if you're looking at it from genre perspective, it's completely unprecedented, and I don't think anything will ever... That's a slice-of-life anime movie like this. I don't think anything will ever do anything like this ever again. Like, K-On! Is a kind of a once-in-a-lifetime phenomena, really. In terms of the crew, it's obviously all the same people from the TV show. So we've got Yamada Naoko directing the show. And I have to say, while we've talked about, like, yeah, she's really young, one thing that really hits you with how young she is when I watched the special features on the Blu-ray, because the American Blu-ray release has all the major special features from the Japanese movie release. So it's got things like footage from the stage greeting from the Piccadilly Theater debut, and you have the 5 main voice actresses and Yamada Naoko on stage. And I have seen lots of things like that before for anime. I have never before seen a thing like that for anime where I couldn't tell at first glance who were the voice actors and who was the director for the movie. Because it's always, here's a bunch of, beautiful 20-something Japanese young women, and then here's like a Japanese dude in his 40s, right? Like, there's a very big difference between the kind of people usually who are anime directors and the kinds of women who are the stars of these sorts of films or TV shows. And Yamada Naoko, if I didn't know any better, I would just say, oh, that might be the voice actress who plays Ui. I don't know. Like, she's the same age as all the voice actresses. She looks the same. And it's kind of like wild. I've never seen something quite like that. And it really put into perspective for me how remarkable and how different Yamada Naoko's position was, particularly at this time, both in terms of being a woman director, but also being so young. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like, when you think about feature films specifically, like, Hayao Miyazaki, I think, was about 40 when he made Castle of Cagliostro. I'm looking at Mamoru Hosoda, his first feature, the One Piece movie, he was in his late 30s. like it's very standard that if you're at that level, you're quite a bit older than Yamada Naoko was here. She is kind of unprecedented unto herself in all sorts of ways. Like, she's kind of having her second act now post Kyoto Animation. She's got a couple big projects coming up soon, and like, she's at the age now where a lot of people would just be getting started with like their feature film careers. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. The screenplay obviously is Yoshida Deko, who did all the stuff for the TV show. Character design chief animation director is again Horiguchi Yukiko. Storyboards for the movie were done by both Yamada Naoko and Ishihara Tatsuya. And then the unit director positions were Yamada Naoko, Ishihara Tatsuya, and then Utsumi Hiroko, who we've talked about with season 2 of K-On! She, of course, a couple years after this goes on to start directing the first couple of seasons of the free anime. So this was kind of like Yamada Naoko doing some of this stuff for like Disappearance of Suzumiya Haruhi. This is like Utsumi Hiroko's, definitely you can see her rising up the ranks similar to what Yamada Naoko did. And also, like Disappearance of Suzumiya Haruhi, Kigami Yoshiji is again credited as layout supervisor. Again, I'm not 100% sure exactly what the layout supervisor does, but Kigami Yoshiji did it on that. He did it on this. Obviously, he also did a lot of like animation for the movie as well. But I just, whenever I see his name pop up, I always take note of it.
That is absolutely one of those made-up credits you give to the person on staff who is so talented, they do so many things, you don't quite know what to give them in the normal order of credits, but you do it anyway. That stretches back to, like, Hayao Miyazaki's credit on Horus, Prince of the Sun is, like, scene design, I think is what he was given, which is a completely made-up credit that was just Isao Takahata going, boy, this Miyazaki kid did a lot on this movie. And, like, that's very much, I feel like, what you're probably getting from Kigami Yoshiji. I mean, layouts are important, and I'm sure he did do a lot of the layout supervision, but that to me kind of reads as, he had a big impact, but not in the traditional chain of command, so here we go.
Yes, yeah. And then again, like, he did a lot of the key animation for the movie as well as like everybody, you know, it's that thing when you look at the key animators, it's like, oh, everybody did the key animation for this movie. And it's just a list of all the people who work at KyoAni did key animation for this film, and it's pretty cool. But
and what a dream team that is, of the storyboards being Yamada Naoko and Ishihara Tatsuya. That's like the heaviest hitters you could bring in. Having Utsumi Hiroko being the other unit director, because we really loved her work in season 2 we talked about in last week's episode. And then of course everyone else is just the K-On! Leaders. But yeah, that's awesome to see. And I think it's so cool that they have a studio culture where someone like Ishihara Tatsuya is cool playing second fiddle to young Yamada Naoko doing this. Like, I think that speaks a lot to, like, the studio culture, because that's healthy and awesome and cool, because a lot of the times people get to a certain level, they don't go back to a supporting position. And I love that happens here.
Yeah, because one's on the Ishihara Tatsuya thing. My favorite bonus feature on the Special Features Blu-ray is there's kind of like a travel doc from the few days that Yamada Naoko and a bunch of people from the crew of this movie went to London to scout for locations and come up with ideas, stuff like that. It's a very cool, like, if people have the home video release, or I assume you probably can also find this somewhere on YouTube, it's well worth watching if you like the movie, because you can see a lot of the, like, ideas for the gags and the montages and stuff like that come from this trip. But Yamada Naoko is there. She's sort of like the main feature of that bonus feature doc. But Ishihara Tatsuya is also there, like, on the edges, and it's very cool to see the two of them as they go visit, like, Stonehenge and talk. And there's an amazing little bit where they go to the Sherlock Holmes Museum, which you see briefly in the movie from just, like, the outside. You see, like, the guard standing in front of 221B, Baker Street. But they go into the museum in this doc, and you have Yamada Naoko sits on the couch with a bowler hat on, pretending to be Watson, and Ishihara Tatsuya sits on the chair, pretending with a deerstalker cap, pretending to be Sherlock Holmes. And then the rest of that documentary that takes place after that, anytime you see Ishihara Tatsuya, he still has the Sherlock Holmes hat on, and it's fucking great, and I loved it. And it's my favorite thing for the bonus features that I watched on the Blu-ray set.
That's great. I mean, that's something they started pioneering with Haruhi, was all the docs about location scouting, which were obviously a big deal with all the kind of anime pilgrimage stuff that happened, right?
Yes.
And this is kind of that in reverse, because they're going outside of Japan. But yeah, this is definitely a movie where you look at it and you don't wonder, did they go to London? They went to London and location scouted heavily, which, you know, for anime, that's not a super expensive thing to do. You fly a couple people over and bring some notebooks, but it's super cool, and you can just tell the attention of loving detail in there.
Yes, I mean it's shocking because I went through this movie again with a pretty fine tooth comb when I was taking some of the screenshots for my notes. And there's like almost no mistakes with the English, and that's crazy. Like, if you're an anime fan, you know the English signage and stuff like that in the background. If they go to America, it's always going to be fucked up. And there's only like one mistake I noticed, and it's like only even arguably a mistake in terms of the grammar on a sign, but it kind of interprets depends on how you interpret the order of things on one of the signs for the like Japanese Appreciation Festival at the end of the film, or near the end of the film. But other than that, like all the English in the background is perfect, and I'm like, that's crazy. That's just like that's fucking unprecedented in the history of anime.
Yes, I do have to say, I think other than like signs at the airport, like, taxi this way or something, the first sign I noticed when they are driving through the city was a big sign for fish and chips. And I thought that was the funniest thing in the world, that's the first thing you see when you're in London is a fish and chips sign.
Well, that's actually the first thing you see when you go to London is just a giant fish and chip sign.
You get off the plane, and at customs, they give you fish and chips.
Yeah, it's like they get off the plane and they have that gag where Yui points at different things and Mio takes a picture, and one thing she points at is just, look, London's English. She just points at a sign and Mio takes a picture of it, and that's what she means. Look, it's fish and chips, and it's all the weird Britishy shit. It's London English. It's
wonderful. All right, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Anything else to say on like the behind-the-scenes background stuff?
No, I think that covers it, because we'll talk about the music stuff later. Needless to say, the music is still done by Hokago Hajime, and we'll talk about some of the specific tracks and stuff later. But I do want to just point out the soundtrack for this movie fucking is amazing.
Yes.
There are lots of really great music on here, but it is still the same music people involved from the show as you would expect.
Thanks for listening to Japanimation Station. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to like and subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and tell your friends.
You can support the show directly on Ko-fi at the link in the description, and remember to check out the Weekly Stuff podcast, our long-running series on movies and video games on all platforms.
And now, back to the show. All right, so what do we want to say about breaking down this movie as it exists? It kind of has three major parts, where you're in Japan early on and they're kind of deciding where to go. You have the whole adventure in London, and then you have the final part back in Japan that is essentially kind of a redux of the series finale. Not like rewriting any of it, but from a different perspective, seeing other scenes, that sort of thing. And so I don't think it's like awkwardly structured at all. It is oddly structured compared to a lot of other movies. And it does... I don't think it depends on you having seen the finale as much as I thought. Like, if you had seen some K-On! But not all of it, I don't think you would be lost at any point in this movie. It's not that in the weeds. But if you have seen the series, then all of the stuff of them deciding what they're going to do for Azusa obviously has this extra resonance, because it's coming in to dovetail with this incredibly... moving ending of the show. And I think that was a really smart way to do this, because, there's kind of two big options you have here, which is do a big movie about them post-graduation, or try to work it into the series itself. And if you're going to work it into the series' timeline itself, you have to try to find, and that series feels so complete, where can you kind of add on to the story? And I think going into one of the big emotional arcs of the last few episodes, but doing it a little bit more from the four senpais' perspective instead of Azusa's perspective, I think was the right call, and makes the whole series feel richer in some.
Yeah, because I would say that is fundamentally what they do, is they, a lot of season 2 is fundamentally about Azusa and from her perspective. And it's her looking up to her senpai, right? And looking at like Yui's back as she grabs her hand and pulls her forward. And that's very much the perspective of the narrative in season 2. And so, whereas obviously season 1 is very much more Yui's perspective and the original 4 girls. And so the movie does feel like what it's trying to do is explore a lot of the kind of emotional space you get in episodes like episode 22 and 24 from the TV show that were very much Azusa POV focused, and explore some of those ideas, but from the original girls from season 1. And I think that's what makes this movie feel like, it's not necessary or whatever. Like, you don't have to, if you watch season 2 and you never saw the movie, I don't think you're like missing something fundamental about K-On!, but it does make it valuable and worthwhile and exploring something that the show didn't already cover. And that becomes very clear in terms of the different way they portray the song that they sing at the end of the movie compared to the TV show and where that focus lies. And I do think it's a really kind of interesting and delicate balancing act because K-On! As a movie can't do normal movie things because movies are even more plot heavy or traditionally plot heavy than a TV show would be. So K-On! Is kind of moving into a weird territory here. And that leads me to one of the first things I want to talk about, which is the beginning of this movie and how it ties into the trailer. Did you watch any of the trailers on the Blu-ray set, Jonathan?
No, I didn't. I have not had time. I've been, I would have watched more of the bonus feature stuff, but I literally watched this starting at like 10 p.m. the previous night. It hasn't even been like 13 hours because I've been traveling this week. So I would have, and I'm excited to dive into that bonus features disc, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the trailers for the movie are fucking hilarious because they basically, I mean, it's not like they don't market the movie as not being a K-On! Movie or something. Like, you could tell it's going to be K-On! The movie, but they definitely imply the movie would have a very different plot line than it does. Like, for instance, nothing about the trailers tells you anything about we're trying to get a gift for Azusa, and that's the plot of the movie. That's not what the trailers talk about. Instead, the trailers take a couple of little moments in the movie and make them the key focus of the trailer, one of them being a Mio line from the very beginning of the film, where she says, "We're all moving off in different directions." In the context of the movie, she is acting when she says that and pretending to be a character in like a more standard band movie about like we're all, it's about the band breaking up and then learning its lesson and coming back together. That's the thing that you would expect a movie like this to be about if you didn't know anything about K-On! And so that's the beginning of the movie. We'll talk about that scene. But that's one of like the big lines they use as an anchor point for the trailer. Another one is the scene when they're at the airport and they're on the walker thing or like the conveyor belt thingy. And Yui and Ritsu are fake interviewing Mugi and asking her, it's like, "Who's your boyfriend? How long have you been dating for?" And she's like, not responding. In the context of the movie, she's pretending to be like a weird celebrity or whatever, and it's like a whole game. But they just put that little piece in the trailer without any of that additional context after you have that line from Mio, thus implying this sense of like, oh, they're all sort of drifting apart and going their own directions, and they're going to go to London before they graduate and then learn a lesson and come back and be reunified. And that's very much the plot it sort of suggests in the trailers, which is fucking genius, because then when you watch the movie, the first scene of the movie is the original 4 girls all pretending like they're in a movie like that, and then them not being able to keep up the act and it entirely breaking down. And it's a fucking brilliant, brilliant way to open up this movie, I think.
It's great. Yeah, that's even funnier knowing the trailers, because you can just tell because they would be making the trailers, obviously, long after they storyboarded and knew what the movie was going to be. And so they knew they had this very goofy, funny opening scene and a couple of those other moments. And I like the idea of, let's just do the trailers as not a mean misdirect, but a gentle, fun, playful misdirect in the spirit of K-On! That's great. It almost feels like the trailers were like edited by the girls or something, right? To make something extra dramatic. Because it's a hilarious opening, because the movie starts and you're very, like, I had kind of known from some backstory I heard about and from the OVA where this was going to be set roughly, but I was like, kind of, where are we in the timeline? What's going on? Like, why are they fighting this way? Like, this is an interesting kind of change that they're making. Obviously, the music they're playing is completely different from what they normally play. And then when Azusa comes in and it's all revealed, it is such a great laugh moment to open the movie, and kind of, It's a very reassuring, this is still K-On!, even though it is in movie form. This is movie K-On!. It is still K-On!, though.
Yes. Because it's great, because there's all these like little bits, like they have a logo at the very beginning of the movie that is like a death metal version of the K-On! Logo with a skull on the exclamation point. And they're all like headbanging and playing heavy metal. I love so much the way Ritsu plays her drums really overly dramatically, like bring the sticks all the way up above her head and stuff. And then they start fighting about like, no, I don't want to make fluffy music anymore. Like the line that Yui has is hilarious, where she says, to be perfectly honest, doing fluffy kind of music, it's kind of cringy, is basically what she says. And then Ritsu gets sort of fake mad at her. And then the whole bit of Azusa then turns on the recording and they start fake playing the music again. And she stops the recording. They stop. She does it again. They start doing it again. And then she goes... she stops it, then she goes to turn it on again, and they all start, and then but she doesn't actually do it. Like that whole bit, it's so perfectly timed. The animation is hilarious. Again, Ritsu playing her drums in this really ridiculous fashion is just the funniest fucking thing in the world. And it is such a great little kind of meta start to this movie to be like, no, this is not going to be your big super dramatic K-On! Story or whatever. Like, we're not taking the opportunity of the K-On! Movie to do a cliche band breakup get together story. This is just going to be the K-On! Stuff you know and love, just on a bigger scale. And that's when you get into the whole opening sequence where you have the actual proper logo for the movie that is very fluffy, and it's like made out of cardboard and they're crayon drawings and stuff. And you have a whole big elaborate kind of opening sequence that actually starts the movie up. And it's just already, the movie is like 5 out of 5 stars just from the first like 5 minutes.
It's great. There's a real Looney Tunes cartoon precision to the stuff where Azusa is turning off and on the radio,
yes.
You know, that I absolutely love. Yeah, it's great. I also love that this is in the period of the story where they have done their entrance exams. They're done. They have nothing left to do. And I love the suggestion that, like, this is how they are spending their time, is like, let's fuck with Azusa. By learning what is on this tape and like creating this whole skit. And that is so in line with a lot of the adventures they're having in the final episodes of the series. It really slots right into where their very bored headspace is.
Yes. And yeah, it's the idea that they're all like, they're pretending to be in Death Devil, Sawa-chan's band. It's fucking hilarious.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, we do get basically a theme song sequence with the big montage and a nice musical number and all of that. And then it's tea time again.
Yes, that is straight to tea time. And so then we have kind of 2 sequences here at the beginning of the movie. You have this sequence with the girls in the hallway from the premiere of season 2, where Yui picks up the Sakura blossoms, where they figure out that they have the conversation about, like, we want to give Azusa a present, and then you have the sequence of them trying to figure out where they want to go. And one thing I love about the first sequence here of them all sitting on the sort of ledge in this hallway is the lighting in this whole piece, where they're kind of calling back to the lighting and the color palette from the premiere of season 2, if you remember, which is much more kind of washed out and a little bit more kind of gray. And it's very much deliberately echoing, I think, a lot of what a very, like, that first half of season 2, setting up the story where Yui has this line, which is the other big line in the trailer, but again, they edited in such a way where it's not clear what she's talking about, where she says, I want to do something before we graduate. I want to give Azusa a present. It's just that second half of that line is not in the in the trailers. It's just, I want to do something before we graduate. And this is also where you get the first instance of a persistent visual motif across the whole movie, which is them looking up at the sky. And in the sky is this line, like a jet stream cutting across the sky, that recurs throughout the film as well. It's not the Takao Nordico cloud. We're not talking about the ominous cloud of death. It's a very interesting, though, visual motif that gets called back to multiple times.
It's definitely the closest we get to the Takao Noriko cloud of death in K-On!
Yes.
And I would not be surprised if Yamada Naoko took some inspiration from her colleague there.
Yes.
But because it's a metaphor for where we're going to go with, like, literally the lyrics of the song that they write for Azusa are about looking up at the same sky and knowing they're, under the same sun and all of that stuff. But then also referencing that they're going to travel internationally. It's obviously it's your perfect kind of Kyoto Animation visual metaphor. But I do love just how kind of messy, and I don't mean messy in a bad way, messy in a very intended, planned K-On! Anime way, the beginning of this movie is, where it's actually doing a very good job of setting up all the major kind of conflicts and tensions for the movie of, like, we want to create something for Azusa, but we're not sure what is best. We want to go on a trip, but we're not really sure where, all of those things. But it's doing it in this very roundabout, kind of stop-start way that is very true to these girls, who are not particularly good at picking things and following through on them, especially because they're in the driver's seat for all of this. Azusa is not, sort of helping steer the activities in the way that she is in a lot of the other parts of KO in season 2, and I think that's an extra funny thing too. But of course, we also get, I love just how over the course of this movie, completely heartfelt and committed Yui is to making this gift thing happen, even though it takes her a while to get there.
Yes, yeah, it is. The whole opening of this movie is to say it's very loosey-goosey in how you sort of slowly put all these pieces together while getting your little bits in here. For instance, you have the entire bit where they're going over where they want to go, and then Yui draws the thing.
I wanted to talk about this.
Draw the line through to see which one it goes to. Of course, Azusa realizes that she's cheating, and that whole scene where like Yui realizes she's been found out, starts to try to run away, trips over. Ritsu does her like over dramatic Yui thing, and runs over. He says it's like Ritsu. Or Nichijou, I learned how to do this, and she does a thing where she makes like concentric circles with her fingers all together.
It's basically a callback to their extra dramatic beach scenes that they had in season 1 on their beach trips, which we never kind of got a follow up to that in season 2. So I'm glad we got that here because it is so good. You're missing the best part of that whole scene though, which is when she starts to make the little folding drawing thing, and she just starts humming Beethoven.
Yes,
and it is,
that's right.
It's beautiful, it's amazing. And then I think it's Mugi starts humming along with her, and it is just the most adorable little scene. Like, that will probably be the clip I watch most on YouTube from this movie going forward, because it just made me howl with laughter.
Yeah, it's very good. But then you have that great cut to where the punishment for Yui is she's wearing this ridiculous paper on her head with a drawn face on it that just has Europe written on it at the bottom. This is where you slowly start to realize that Yui, her thing is she wants to go to Europe, has no idea what the fuck Europe is.
Nope.
It doesn't realize that London is in Europe or any of that stuff. They have Ton-chan pick by putting their teacups in Ton-chan's tank, which is just amazing. And then you get probably the most adorable and heartwarming moment in the whole movie, which is when Ton-chan picks London and Mio's reaction to London being picked, where she was acting like very cool and Mio-esque, being like, oh, I want to go to London, but I'm not going to be crazy about it. As soon as London gets picked, though, she just starts freaking out, like, yes, oh, London, oh my god, London, and it's amazing.
It's amazing. Of course, it had to be London, because Mio is the only one who actually kind of had a strong opinion about where to go, because everyone else, again, was vague to the point of, like, Yui not really knowing what Europe is, or that London is just part of Europe. Well, was at the time. Not anymore.
But it's still part of Europe. It's just not part of the European Union. They can't remove themselves from the entire continent.
They would if they could. But anyway, no. So geopolitics aside, I love all of that, and then I love all the planning for it. The gag where they invite Azusa, and Azusa goes outside to politely ask her parents' permission, and then she comes back in, and this had been a question in the back of my mind since the OVA is I know, graduation trips are a thing, especially, my understanding in Japan is maybe it's more of a cultural thing, because I've seen this in multiple anime, but, they would still have to clear this with their parents, right? Was, just a thing in the back of my head, and, money situation and all of that, and I love that the movie totally, acknowledges that in this scene by going, oh no, you weren't wrong to be wondering that, the girls were just kind of too silly to think about it, and so when Azusa asks permission, they finally all pull out their phones and call their parents, which also leads to a scene in Yui's house where we see Yui's parents for the first time, which is one of my favorite moments in the movie, because you see Yui's parents, and I love their only moment in the whole fucking series, in the entire canon that is K-On!, is her mom bringing a book of English phrases and her dad saying, you're going to need a power converter, and that made me kind of howl with laughter, that is the total sum contribution of her parents in the series, is English book and power converter. Perfect.
Yes, I love that. And that we don't see, the parents for the other girls. It's just, you see Yui's mom and dad. It's okay, it's not Ui that's just sort of raising her older sister somehow. She does have parents. You do have Ui basically packing for her sister and just putting in just giant piles of Japanese food that, of course, gets paid off later when they're in their hotel room. But I love that she's just trying to she obviously knows that her sister's just going to end up fucking starving to death in London if she doesn't pack something in there.
Yes. No, that's wonderful. I will admit, I love what they did with Yui's parents. There is some small part of me that wishes they'd done the Charlie Brown thing with the parents. Because this feels like the world where that would happen. I know we do hear other adults speak technically, but I do feel like their parents would have the rah, 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 rah voices in the world of K-On!
It would be pretty great to have Sao-chan be like talking to another teacher and the other teacher just goes rah, 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 but Sao-chan doesn't because she's still a child.
Well, what it would be in this movie, because the end of the movie, the part of the payoff is the older teacher kind of lightening up for the K-On! Girls, is he starts doing that and then he eventually speaks normal Japanese because he's lightened up. Anyway, but yes, that's all great. What else in this section before they wind up leaving do we need to talk about?
There's just like a couple of other adorable little moments. You have like the occult members that show up there, and they have the whole joke about them saying it's like, oh, well, could you get us a picture of Nessie or whatever?
Yes.
And Yui doesn't realize that that's like an impossible task, which is amazing. There's one little detail I fucking love is you have that scene where Yui is having tea with Nodoka at her house, telling her about the London trip. And there's one little detail where she's pouring tea into a cup that has Nonchan written on it. That means that Yui has a mug specifically for Nodoka, who I guess must have at one point had the nickname Nonchan. That's her mug at Yui's house. And it's little, like, there's little stuff like that all over this movie, but little background details like that are incredibly heartwarming. But and it's the kind of thing that most anime would not think to do. Like, you wouldn't think to put names on the mugs, they would just be mugs. But there's just a lot of, like, sort of, Nodoka's not a major character in the movie, but there's all those sort of lived-in details where you feel their relationship, that they've known each other since they were, like, 5 years old or something. Of course she would have a little tea mug at Yui's house.
Yeah, it makes total sense, and it's like kind of half suggested because you don't see the full name on the mug. You see like the known Sha, but you can fill in the rest. Like, oh, that must be known. And at one point she would have called her known Shan. That makes sense given how Yui addresses people in a lot of her life. I'm sure Azusa has an Azunyan mug that Yui has made her at some point. So it all works. It's beautiful. Yeah. I also I enjoy them shopping for luggage and a lot of those little details because I have been to Japan and there are places to buy luggage fucking everywhere. And there's specifically those big hard shell cases they have. Everybody in Japan has those. My brother has now like 3 of them since he came back. And there's just little details like that just, again, you can always rely on Kyoto Animation to get all that right.
Yes, you also have, you get a close-up on their piece of paper at one point of their plan for London, of like where all the things they want to do. And Yui's is that she wants to go to a chocolate store and she wants to go to a cupcake store, which is amazing. Everyone wants to get afternoon tea, which one of the best little jokes in the movie is that they'd actually get afternoon tea because they didn't make a reservation, which is the fucking funniest thing. Mio wants to go to Abbey Road. But it's I love that Yui's thing is I want to go get chocolate and I want to go get cupcakes, and that's why we're going to London. Those are her additions to their trip plans.
Well, that's in the OVA. She was testing her English. Where is delicious cake, please? So
yes,
yeah. And they do get cupcakes at one point in the movie, which is a nice payoff to that. I think it's within like a montage, but it's great. I also love there's this. I say love. I love all of it. I do. I guess that's kind of redundant at this point. But just the whole scene of travel and them like showing up early in the morning for the bus and getting on the train, and then I think they're in Narita Airport, and it's a very accurate version of Narita Airport, which was like cool for me because it just was these little like blasts of nostalgia you keep getting, and then getting on the flight where they don't acknowledge it. That is about as long a flight as you can take on planet Earth, right? From like Japan to England, they're like almost exact opposite points on the globe. So they were in that plane for a very long time.
Well, they're traveling backwards in time.
They are. That whole running gag is fantastic, and I love that. At no point in the movie does Yui actually seem to understand what that means. She is just fully. They even have a whole conversation later about sending text messages back and forth in the future and the past. And I think at the end of this movie, Yui still just believes they traveled in time.
Yes, that's they traveled. It's one day in England. It's one day in Japan. It's on the calendar. They fucking time traveled. Yeah, all that stuff's great, and it's just that little lived-in world of Keon. It's so important to get those details of. You go on the bus, you go to the airport, you sit around and fuck around for a little bit, you play on the little people mover thing, you go sit on the plane, get your eye masks out. All the minutia and the ephemera of travel is so much what this movie is about. And I love that it's so much more about that than it is about visiting Big Ben or whatever, which is what you'd think a movie about going to London would be. But all of the stuff of actually visiting the London stuff is mostly just covered in montages. The real place where the movie stops and slows down and focuses is going to board onto the airplane and hanging out in the hotel rooms at night and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's where the movie spends the most time, and that feels so appropriately Keon that you spend more time at the airport and on the airplane ride over than you do visiting locations in London in terms of screen time.
Yeah. Or like when they
so much what the movie's about.
When they get to London, like their first day is taking a taxi and getting to the wrong hotel and then figuring out how they're going to get to the right hotel, and that is what opens up their adventure on the subway. And then they want to get food. Where do we go for food? Oh, let's go to a revolving sushi shop. Like, that is all not only very Keon, but very relatable, I think, all of that. Because when you travel, like, it's just true. If you go see a big, kind of standout tourist attraction, you remember that, I think, less than the experiences of getting there and who you were with and your downtime in the hotel and all those kind of mundane things that characterize most life. And so this movie, to me, just like as a travel log, is one of the most like relatable, realistic portrayals of travel I think I've ever seen. And I love that about it.
Yeah, because I've seen plenty of other movies that are like this, because it's such a common thing for high school anime to be like, oh, we get the movie version, let's go somewhere else. Like I said, like Love Live does the same thing where they go to New York City, but there it's about what do they do at famous New York City locations and the concerts, and like that's the main focus. It's not we're having bad microwave yakisoba in the fucking hotel room at night, whereas this movie is all about those vibes. This is amazing. You also have all the stuff on the plane ride over between Yui and Mio, which is amazing, where you both have some of the funniest stuff and some of the most heartwarming stuff. So you have the whole conversation between the two of them where Yui says, let's practice English. And from this point forward, we'll only speak in English. And us is like, okay. And they do the whole back and forth, like, chicken or beef? Chicken. Excellent. And then of course the flight attendant comes over and asks them in perfect Japanese. It's like, do you want to have a Japanese meal or do you want to have a Western style meal? And it's a great payoff to this very long joke of them very awkwardly trying to only speak English to get each other in like broken words and phrases.
They're on Japan Airlines. I'm not sure what they were expecting from the like wait staff on the plane, but no, it's great. And I love the like subtle characterization of all the girls over the course of the movie, and like who's good at English, who isn't, who's making the effort. Ritsu confidently keeps trying but winds up just saying Japanese words because she just doesn't actually put in the work for it, which is very Ritsu. Mugi is very gung-ho about it. Mio is quietly in the background the best at it because of course she is. All of that is extremely fun as well.
Yeah, because there's the moment where they go to the hotel it ultimately is the wrong hotel, and Mugi tries to talk to the lady there but can't understand her because she's speaking too fast, which is a good detail, and Mio's the one, as you say, who like quietly in the background has actually picked out the details. You also, on the airplane, I want to point out the moment where Yui wakes up and opens up the slide on the window and sees like the sunrise while they're above the clouds. This is also where you get another appearance of the line of clouds motif is in this shot as well, and Yui looking out and seeing that, wanting to wake up Azusa to see it as well, but realizing Azusa's asleep and not waking her up to let her sleep. But it's like it's such a great little moment to stop and focus in on for the movie, and it's one of many instances where the backgrounds and the color, and you just see how gorgeous it is when they get to spend this much time really sort of luxuriating in the detail of some of these shots, and the way the clouds look and the coloring of everything is just absolutely beautiful.
It is, and and that moment just is an opportunity to step back and just say the backgrounds in this movie are incredible. Like Kyoto Animation in everything we've watched has great backgrounds, and I know they do it alongside one of their partner studios. This is where they farm out some of the work, but like I think K-On! The movie takes quite a big step up, even above the already beautiful backgrounds of the TV show or their other shows. There's just a level of like detailed, handcrafted, nuanced, line work and color work and detail and everything, not just in the London sections, but maybe most notably in the London sections, which is really incredible to see.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing stuff. They then arrive at the airport, and you get the beginning of the running gag of anytime there's something that's revolving, Mio freaks out because she loses her luggage at the airport, which is also the most relatable thing in the world, is because she doesn't lose her luggage. She thinks that she has lost her luggage, but it is actually just there, been set aside off of the rotating conveyor belt.
Yeah, Sean, I'm actually glad you brought that moment up, because I think when she's at the luggage carousel and the bag is put aside, but at first she's worried about it, that's another one of those moments that I feel like you never see in a movie, but happens every time you fucking travel, right? Is just what the hell happened to my luggage? Especially if you're traveling with 5 people, one of those bags is getting misplaced, at least in a minor way, as happens here. Frankly, those girls are lucky that all their instruments weren't smashed to pieces and half their bags weren't lost, because I feel like that's what would actually happen. But, they live something of a fairy tale life.
That would be the most tragic KO movie ever if Gita got fucking smashed up during travel. Oh my god, my heart could not take that film. It would be the most depressing movie ever made.
That would be the very dramatic version of the K-On! Movie, is Gita gets smashed and she has to bring it back to where that guitar was originally made in London to get it repaired, and it's like a pilgrimage. That would actually be pretty good.
Yeah, it's an adaptation of the great Zatoichi movie, Zatoichi's Cane Sword, where his sword gets broken and he has to go find the blacksmith that originally made it to repair his sword.
I'd watch it. Amazing. Yeah, that sounds good to me. It would be very funny to see that credit at the end of the movie based on Zatoichi's Cane Sword. All right. Yeah, and then I love this whole section. I like it. Sounds like they did get actual British people to voice a lot of the English people in the movie. It does not. Once in a while, you definitely get the quality of this is Japanese voice actors trying to do English. But the woman at the desk at the hotel they go to, some of the other people they meet are clearly actual English people, which you don't typically see in, I feel like, Japanese media.
Yeah, or you have the MVP of the movie, the old British taxi driver with mustache, who is amused at these 5 Japanese girls who don't know where the handle is on the taxi cab, and stuff like that. He gives them a playful little wink, and of course he asks them. I love there's that whole exchange where he's like, "The Ibis, which Ibis theater?" They have no idea what he's saying. And Ritsu goes, "It's the London one, of course." Where do you think we're going? We're in London. Of course we want to go to the London City Ibis hotel. And it's nope. It's the other one.
No idea how big London is. It would be like going to a Tokyo hotel and saying, the one in Tokyo.
Of course. I want to be in the Tokyo hotel. You also get a great shot of them all lounging around outside, and the double-decker classic-style London bus drives by. And I just want to draw attention to the advertisement on it, which is for a musical comedy based on the film A Private Function called Berry Blue Eyes, which has a little cheeky pig face sticking out of the corner of the ad. And I desperately want to know what this musical comedy is, what the movie is based on is, and I love it. And you see this same advertisement in a couple of places, and I love this weird fake ad for something.
That had to be based on something they saw, right? That had to be in London when they went for their scouting trip. There was some musical being advertised. I'm super curious if anyone has put together, what on earth the inspiration could have been. Because there is no actual, if you Google it, Berry Blue Eyes with the pig poster. But I do feel like Kyoto Animation at some point owes us the making of that movie. We need to see it.
Yes. That should be their next film is Berry Blue Eyes.
You also have the sequence in the subway, which has, I think, the single most impressive simulation of in-camera effects we've seen from Kyoto Animation, which is this moment where all 5 of them are sitting on the subway. I think they've got lollipops or something that they're eating, right? Yeah. And it is this pull focus they do across all 5 girls who are in a line kind of across the edge of the screen into the background, and you go from Azusa to Yui to Ritsu to Mugi to Mio, and you're kind of like each one of them kind of comes into focus while the others come out of focus. That's just one of those like super impressive bits of compositing where everybody in the photography department just deserves some credit for like that kind of amazing simulation of an in-camera effect, like an in-camera effect that would be a fairly skilled use of the camera in live action, let alone to simulate in animation. And it's one of those, this whole sequence is kind of built like a music video montage, so it reminds me of some of the stuff you'll see in like the Mio music videos in the end credits of the show, which we get another one in the movie, one of the many joys of this film. But I just had to single out that scene. There's also just a bunch of great shots of them on the subway that feel like they are the K-On! Album covers, basically. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, because there's one that I also got the screenshot, but this is absolutely one of the most iconic shots from this movie, is all of them sitting on the bench with their luggage and suitcase and stuff, and you have the Aldgate East subway station sign on the right-hand side of the frame.
It's the image that has been on screen the whole time if you're watching the YouTube version of this episode, because I saw that, I went, that's the image for this episode, I'm sure Sean will have it, and you did.
It's also the image that if, like, you look up a review for this movie online, the online reviewer probably put that screenshot in the review somewhere, because it's such a perfect shot, and it just gets everything about the whole middle hour of this movie where they're in London is, like, summed up in that one shot, I basically feel. And it's amazing. But then this is where you have the whole sequence of their, traveling around trying to figure out where they want to eat. They stumble upon a kaiten sushi place in London, which this is... The idea of the kaiten sushi thing is at least based on that travel doc, because they did go to one in the travel doc, but it didn't quite look like this store. So I don't know if they found a different store or something, because the whole decor of it is perfect, but it's much more high class than the actual London kaiten sushi place they went to in the travel doc. But this starts, for me, my favorite joke in this whole fucking movie, which is them encountering this like weird British guy who runs the store, who thinks that they are the other band that we later learn, Love Crisis, that is actually supposed to play here. And you have the whole part where Ritsu says, like, leave this to me, like, I'll take care of this. And she walks up to him and she goes, I am Bucho. We are Okyaku-san. And so, shimasen. And that's the clip I have seen over and over and over again on YouTube, because then after that she makes a little heart with her hands, and then she starts freaking out and goes, I love sushi. And then she puts her hand on Yui's shoulder and just says, like, London's too much for me. Like, London's too intense. And it is like the best minute of any animated movie ever made, is the desperate attempt that Ritsu has to try to explain. And I love that it starts with, like, mixing English words and Japanese words, and it just ends with her saying a purely Japanese sentence. And so, shimasen, she just says it in, like, a vaguely Englishy sounding voice for Japanese. It's like she can't even put an English word into that last sentence. It's just purely Japanese. And it's fucking great.
It's fucking great. This whole scene is wonderful. And it also highlights something I really loved about this movie, is how much music there is in it. Like, if I have... It's not really a complaint about the show, because I think the show knows what it is and where its priorities are. But something I just kind of always want more of is scenes of them playing music, because I love it. And obviously there's also, those are very hard to animate, so I understand why they are not all over the show, right? And the ones that we do get are always wonderful. But this film has like a much higher like per capita amount of music performance than you get in episodes of the TV series. You get one here. They have a later performance at the like Japan Culture Festival in London. You have the one in their classroom at the end. You just get a lot of it. And like, obviously, I think any fan going to the theater for the K-On! Movie would want some big theatrical, movie caliber performances. And I think you get that. And I like that you get them spread throughout the movie and you don't have to kind of wait for them. And they come sometimes in very unexpected packagings, because this whole sequence is utterly ridiculous on the level of plot. It's based on like the most insane coincidence in the history of cinema, but it works so well because it is so, I think, cued into the specific reality that K-On! Lives in. And again, it gives you what you want, with which, if you're going to the movie, you got to do at least a little bit of give the people what they want. And what they want is the girls getting up on stage unexpectedly, seeing a man in the audience with a turban, and deciding to play the Curry Curry Rice song. Yes. Of course.
It's amazing, yeah. I also love, like, all the little things of, like, the dude who runs the store looks like he's a fucking giant. because these are all Japanese high school girls, and so they are tiny. That was another thing I realized looking at the video of all the voice actors in Yamada Naoko at the premiere, is Toyosaki Aki, the actress who plays Yui. When she's next to the other voice actresses, she looks like a giant because she's like a head and a half taller than all of them. But then I stopped and was like, but she's probably like 5'8" or something. I looked it up and she's 5'7".
That's amazing.
Which is tiny by obviously like American standards. So like it's very real that this dude is just looks like a fucking titan next to all the girls.
The bit of animation where Yui has to lower the mic is so perfect.
Yes.
Because she does a whole fucking notch and then has to go a whole notch lower. And I love the attention to detail on that. That just feels like that is, I don't know, Yamada Naoko has had that experience somewhere and is putting it into the movie.
Yeah, it's all those little things of like the height difference and stuff, and just like the multicultural nature of London as a city compared to most places in Tokyo where the girls would be used to. I like those little things of like you have an Indian dude who's here at this Kaiten Zushi bar in fucking London. You know, it's such a weird sort of mixing of cultures that for a city like London is very authentic. It's very different than the kind of locales we've seen in K-On! And I like that, like, attention to those things, that you have, like, an ethnic diversity of the people in London that is different than what you see in the normal, like, locations in K-On! And I think that's really well done.
This is actually something I want to pause on, Sean, because this is something that struck me. This is a conversation we've had over the years on the podcast. The stupidity of the whole anime characters have big eyes so they don't look Japanese thing, which is the most racist thing I encounter in academia over and over in my studies, is all the people explaining how, really, if you think about it, the anime eyes show that a guilt in the Japanese people for their own appearance because they want to look more Western in their animation. No, I know that sounds horrifically racist. I've read that in multiple peer-reviewed articles, and I find it horrifically racist. This movie is a great example to throw at people who don't understand this distinction, because when you see the K-On! Girls next to all the English characters in the movie, it just snaps into place, right?
Yes.
They look Japanese. Yui and her friends look Japanese, and the English people they look recognizably English or Western or American or whatever you want to call it, right? The Indian dude, it's fairly stereotypical, and we can talk about that, but you can tell the differences. Like, their eyes being big and detailed, that's a cartoon thing. That's not a race thing. Like, and I do understand there is some research, and you can go back to like Osamu Tezuka and some of the origins and where he gets some of that from, but it has been 60 some years, and like there is a whole tradition that has evolved. And I think if you look at how the eyes are used, animation is an exaggerated medium, and this movie is just, I will throw this at people in the future who ask me about the whole eye deal in anime, because I feel like this is a pretty good primer on why that's bullshit.
Yeah, it's a good thing to point out, is that this is a very good example of ways in which Japanese animation will ethnically code people in ways that, if you are used to seeing like American media or something like that, not Japanese media, and you don't think about it, are totally different than how we would ethnically code people. But if you look at how pronounced the noses are drawn for all the British people, right? Like that's part of that ethnic coding of how you're trying to, through a drawn image, represent that these people are foreign, is that they draw the noses, right? And make them very pronounced and much more distinct. Whereas all the noses for the main girls are like, it's like a little shadowed dot in the middle of their face. Like they barely have noses, because that's the stylization of Can versus all of the other foreign characters in the movie. So yeah, it's a good example to point out. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's like, and the movie is racist. I say this like, that's the way in which a culture is going to try to find details to represent different people differently in order to draw those lines and distinguish them, particularly in a movie like this where those lines need to be distinguished because it's part of the plot of the film. And yes, there are lots of people who watch Dragon Ball Z who are like, and Goku's a white guy, and it's like, nope, that's not how that works. His name is Son Goku. I'm pretty sure he's not an American. I'm pretty sure that's not how that works.
The point is, and this is just the thing that is so forgotten all the time in these Western discussions of the eye issue, as I think about it, is no one thinks about the Japanese perspective. That Japanese people who Dragon Ball was made by and for look at Goku and think he's Japanese. just because he's a cartoon character in Japan, and it's the same with the K-On! Girls. Those are absolutely coded as Japanese to the viewership. And again, yeah, coding in and of itself is a neutral term. There can be good coding and there can be bad coding, but it is absolutely 100% inevitable that there will be coding, especially if you're doing some kind of like multi-ethnic story. This is true in live action as well, in your costume design and all sorts of things. And of course, some of these parameters evolve over time, but like this movie, and I don't think this movie, other than maybe the Indian guy where it is broaching on stereotypical, although it is for the joke is ultimately on Yui there, that she sees that and goes for the curry thing to kind of try to be like cross-cultural. But like other than that, I don't think the movie's doing anything wrong, but it's interesting to study. The K-On! Girls have these kind of plain, round faces where a lot of the expressiveness is in the eyes, and then the English characters have very angular faces with a lot of like details around the nose and mouth versus the detail in the eyes where you get it for the K-On! Girls. And again, this is the kind of thing that I think a lot of people who write about anime, but I think have a very surface level understanding about it, don't really look into. And this movie the sushi scene would be a great thing to just clip out and be like, here's my answer to that question.
Yes, this is you have to change your reference point and put your brain outside your body, right? It's like you've got to think less about like how you have been culturally trained to decode certain like drawings and things like that racially, because you're dealing with a different culture's representation of these things. So then after all the stuff there, you go to the hotel rooms, and again, I just love the attention this movie pays to the time spent in the hotel rooms at night. That's like a big part of the runtime of this movie, is them just sort of like chilling out in their hotel rooms, because that's the reality of travel, right? The reality of travel is, you think about often, I went to go see the Statue of Liberty, and then I went to go see this museum, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, in reality, when I went, the couple times I've been to New York City, most of the time I was there was sleeping or hanging out or staying in the hotel room because it was snowing that day or whatever. And it's like that time spent hanging out with the people you're traveling with in the hotel room. It's just the kind of thing that movies about travel don't usually spend this amount of time on. And I love seeing all those little things, them eating all their like snacks that Yui packed, Yui trying to plug in her like hair dryer thingy and it fucking exploding on her, because even though her dad warned her, she forgot to use the converter, and she's like dispirited by it. It's like, I want to go home, because it started spewing out fire at her. You get all the stuff of like Azusa starts having this recurring dream of, she's trying to figure out what are her senpai doing behind her back, and she's worried that Yui might not actually be graduating, and so she has these recurring nightmares, which I also think is just like a nice representation of when you're traveling. Like you get like, because this is what happens to me whenever I travel, is I get like weird dreams and stuff like that, where I feel like my brain is like trying to process all this new information of where I'm in, and so you just like, your brain at night for me just like goes into a really weird mode. And I love all these weird dreams she has of like recycling through all these scenes from K-On! Season 1 and 2, but Yui is her classmate instead of her senpai now because she got held back. All those little moments just fill in the life of this movie so much.
Absolutely. I think that's so true. I love that dream sequence. It is that perfect kind of K-On! Dream sequence that is both funny and surreal, the way it kind of like bends space. And absolutely, very much a good representation of travel. And then the next day is where we probably get our biggest montage of actual, like, touristy things, where we get them in front of 221B, and we get them, I think that's where we get them on Abbey Road at one point. There's a lot going on here. We get the just absurdly amazing joke of Yui putting her hand in the dog poop trash can.
Yes.
Not knowing, just thinking it's something about a dog, not understanding what it is, and then a nice old lady with her dog comes up to throw away the trash, and they realize and all run away in a truly stupendous piece of animation.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's the funniest thing in this whole sequence here is, her putting her hand in the doggy poop bin. And it's just that huge wide shot of them all running across is so good, of them running away from Yui. Especially because the best part is like how frantic Mio is about it. It's so well characterized that she's in front of the pack and she's running so haphazardly that she ends up tripping, and then getting up and sprinting off screen, and Yui is chasing after them. It's incredibly funny. Yeah, this whole sequence is kind of like the big standout montage in terms of the London stuff. And this is where you have one of the songs from the movie Unmei wa Endless, which is kind of the theme song of the movie. This is all the song that plays during all the trailers and stuff. That plays during this big montage, and there's so many great little moments. This is also where if you watch the travel documentary thing on the Blu-ray, a lot of the stuff from that travel documentary is, or a lot of the things in the movie is reflecting things that happen in that travel documentary. Like they're all sitting in the tube and the lights flicker on and off and they kind of freak out about it, which happened to them in the actual travel documentary. They go and visit a model of the Rosetta Stone, which they actually did when they went to London.
Also just a phenomenal callback to the Romeo and Juliet stuff in the series. And then we're like, oh, the Occult Club gave us one of these. And like, well, this is a recreation too. This still isn't the original one. I love it.
Yeah, and it's just this whole sequence is so much fun just to look at the backgrounds to look at London represented this way, right? Because you're so used to seeing Japan depicted in anime for very obvious reasons, but you almost never get a location like London drawn like this. It kind of, reminds me in like the video game world. It's like when you get a video game that's not like an open world video game with a lot of detail that's not set in like New York City or something, and you finally get to go somewhere else. And you're like, oh my God, you just never get to see this kind of location. Or like for me, it makes me think of like in The Last of Us 1, kind of a weird thing, but Last of Us, when you visit that like fake Colorado University, and as someone who went to Colorado University, you see all like this version of the world. Or I don't know why for me all the Colorado ones have to be post-apocalyptic, but Horizon Zero Dawn does the same thing.
I don't know of any Colorado set games that aren't post-apocalyptic, so I think you're making a good point.
Yes, but it's like, if you're from Colorado and you want to see Colorado locations represented in fictionalized media, or at least in video games, you got scraps to pick from. But it's that sort of thing where you usually get a very narrow set of locations depicted in whatever the medium is because of the realities of the production of it. So getting all of the like, oh, here's this just like incredibly luscious version of an anime drawing of an English breakfast and of like English storefronts and English houses, and the animals, right? And there's lots of like, oh, here are all the squirrels and stuff in the park, and here's all the pigeons and the geese, right? Which are, some of these are animals, certainly squirrels are in Japan, but they're not as common and stuff like that. So you don't see them depicted in anime, particularly if an anime is set in Tokyo, in the same way. So, if you're watching an anime, you're going to see a lot of like tanuki are going to pop up or deer are going to pop up because they're much more common. So here, all the wildlife and the different breeds of dog, right? You're not seeing Shiba Inu. You're seeing all these like more kind of British breeds of dog that are much more common in England.
The little bulldog and all of that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff is just such a delight. It's a real visual treat, and you can see the fruits of the labor of that scouting team going out and taking all the pictures and the reference and all that kind of stuff, because it's so lived in. It feels so real, while also being obviously an animated representation of these things. So there's a certain amount of artifice to it that's very kind of beautiful. So yeah, this whole montage sequence is just amazing.
The other thing we just have to praise this movie for, the thing that makes this the best movie about people who don't live in London visiting London ever made, is that this montage is not scored to the Clash's London Calling. Which is that is a song that is, I know intellectually is a good song, and I fucking despise that song because it has been so overused in Hollywood movies where you do the stupid, like, fast cut to the opening drum riff and then you have them all going around London with, like, these big sweeping shots as London Calling plays. Just horrible. Hollywood has ruined that song forever, and it is very refreshing to instead have a nice, fun, bubbly anime song by Tom Hack and the Girls of K-On! Playing as they visit a nice animated London. Immediately puts this way above the pack.
Yes, it has a very different flavor than other movies set in London you would have seen. You also get the sequence where they go to ride the London Eye, and Mio doesn't want to do it because she is traumatized by things that revolve after the conveyor belt thing at the airport and the luggage thing, and then the kaiten zushi. She's just like, I just don't want anything to do with things that revolve. But then, of course, when she rides it, she's the one who's the most excited about being able to ride in the giant Ferris wheel, and it's great. They go to the borough market, and this is one of my favorite shots. Is this? They're all eating the cupcakes outside in the borough market, and just the lighting, because it's kind of starting to become dusk. But you have the orangish lights and all the different kind of red and green banners of the marketplace. It's just, there's just so much gorgeous scenery and so much gorgeous art being drawn in this whole big montage.
It's wonderful. And then it is followed by the second night in the hotel, where we get basically the K.O.N equivalent of an Abbott and Costello routine, where you have Yui and Azusa, who are sharing one room, basically circling each other through the rooms, because the whole setup of this sequence is Yui comes in and kind of passes out with Azusa, and it's a very nice, sweet little sequence. But then she wakes up and goes and hangs out with the other girls to talk about the song they're writing. Azusa wakes up, comes to look for her. Yui has already left and gone to the other room, but she has left the trail of candy, which was set up earlier in the movie, because she was leaving a trail of candy to find the club room again. And so Azusa finds it, and eventually they just wind up panicked looking for the other one, going through the rooms in a circle. It is the most ridiculous broad comedy the show has ever done, and it absolutely killed me.
Yeah, I love it to death. Yeah, they're just sort of going around through the door that connects the room out through the front door while Yui's leaving this trail of candy. I love the little detail of Ritsu can't get to the keyhole. She has to stand up on her tippy toes to try to see through the keyhole, because it's just calibrated very differently for her. You also get half asleep Azusa in the first go around, which is about the most adorable thing you've ever seen in the world, because she kind of has no idea what's going on. And the other best part is during this whole sequence, Yui is wearing a pink shirt that has Pari, which is how you'd write Paris in Japanese, on it with a heart. And I love that she's in London and she's wearing her pajamas basically as a shirt that says Paris on it. I mean, all of Yui's outfits across this whole movie are the best.
She has so many weird bespoke outfits that we didn't see in the show. She's got this set of pajamas early on that has a dog on the back of it. They're just increasingly ridiculous over the course of the movie. It's one of those things where I feel like the movie timetable allowed them to design more costumes, because their costumes are pretty set for the TV show, and it's just awesome to see.
Yeah, all the outfits are great. She's got one shirt that has the Japanese word honeymoon on there. She has her outfit when she's on the plane is fucking hilarious, because it's got a fake Anpanman, big round cartoon character face on the back of it. She has some very outrageous fashion, and it's pretty great. We also missed at the beginning of the sequence is where, because you mentioned earlier, it's they both kind of pass out together and it's lovely. But you missed that the beginning of that sequence is Yui coming into the room.
Oh, I forgot.
Going to go kiss Gita, or and hug Gita, but Azusa thinks it's her. And so she fucking elbows Yui in the stomach. And it's the most brutal anime takedown I've seen this side of Choo Choo punching the shit out of that girl in Witch from Mercury. And Yui just gets fucking taken out. And it's an amazing callback to the self-defense book sequence from the OVA. It's just, man, Yui just gets fucking annihilated by Azusa there.
Well, because Azusa also has the just adorable, I'm sorry, Yui, I don't like you that way, or something. It's and honestly, it's a more sensitive version of the, gay joke than you would get in a lot of anime, certainly from 10 years ago also, because there's no homophobia to it. It's just this weird Azusa's this is not our relationship, and that's very funny. And then when she realizes it, she feels horrible and wraps herself up in the comforter on the bed, and that is when Yui comes and lies next to her. That's very sweet.
Yeah, it's very good. So then the next day you have a lovely little scene where Yui starts walking outside on her own in the morning. This is also where you have this very interesting color palette where it goes a little bit more washed out again with this much sort of brighter light, because it's this kind of morning light that washes out the tones a little bit with these very dramatic shadows. While she is trying to think up the song, and she just goes through all these just nonsense lyrics. She runs into the recycling only sign and just goes recycling only, London, 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 all in her head, because she can't think up any of the lyrics. And it's a great little tiny moment. And then that's where she also slips and falls between the legs of a guy who's walking his dog. I just like all the weird little tiny references to the height difference there. Like that guy is so tall that she ends up slipping between his legs because he's so much bigger than her.
Yes, no, the wonderful little scene, and you definitely, I wonder how much that is just Yamada Naoko and the other, like, women at KyoAni who went on this trip, realizing how short they are compared to some, like, of the tall British people, and that became a major recurring theme in the movie. There's more good tourism here, seeing... I don't even know the names of all these places in London, but you get the tower that's got the bridge across.
Mm-hmm. London Bridge.
London Bridge. That makes more sense. That would make sense. That's the one that falls down, right?
Yes.
Anyway, I love it's just such an incredibly bespoke, detailed it's got like a little bit of watercolor in it. It looks like it's really gorgeous. All of this stuff. It's not as big a montage as the previous days, but all of this is great. And there's another night at the hotel afterwards that's lovely. But in the middle, we get the whole scene where they get the ask from the girl back at the club from the Livehouse episode if they want to play at this little show that's going on, the Culture Festival, which is also where you get the whole gag about texts going back and forth into the future, which was very funny.
Yes, it's like send it forward into time, and they all press it together. I do want to point out, just with Mio being my favorite character, I have to point out all the Mio moments. There is in that one little sequence, they walk past this thing called the London Bridge Experience, which is one of the 2 top London attractions, according to the sign, for the price of one. I guess it's supposed to be like a haunted mansion kind of thing, because this is also a reference to something they stumbled upon in that travel doc. And specifically in that, at the time, Yamada Naoko is like, they ask her, like, where are all the places you'd want to take all the different characters? The one she said for me was like, I want to take her to this thing and just see her freak out. So I love that there's like a weird vampire dude outside that she's just freaked out by. All that's great. Also, all the grocery store, they're at the grocery store and Yui is buying Jeff biscuits. She's getting potato crisps and Jeff biscuits and onion rings. And I want some Jeff biscuits. I don't know who he is, but I bet he's got some pretty good biscuits.
There's a pack that just says digestive on the front. What do you think that's supposed to be?
I have no idea. But, Jeff biscuits, they're the original and they're made with sunflower oil.
They're only 99 pence. Looks pretty good to me.
99 pence. This is where you get, if you can read Japanese, the secret funniest joke in the whole movie, which is you get a close-up on the page where Yui is trying to translate the lyrics to Gohan wo Kazu into English. And it's just the most nonsense, mix of random katakana and English language words. Like the title Gohan wa Okazu, she is translated to rice wa okazu, with rice in katakana, wa in English letters for some reason, and okazu in hiragana. And the best part, though, is you have this whole line after the chorus where in the original song, this is where she's talking about, if you're from Kansai, it's got to be rice and okonomiyaki, but I'm not from Kansai. And then the other girl's like, what are you talking about? It's a little joke bit. In her attempt to translate the lyrics, she writes, Kansai man is like bake and rice, bad me, while Kansai man no. Oh my God, in parentheses. And I love that she translated Kansai Jin as Kansai man. And that her trying to translate but I'm not from Kansai. It's her basically saying bad me is Kansai man no. The response to that is oh my God. It's maybe the funniest thing in the movie, and it's just a little visual gag where the camera does hang on this for long enough that if you're very quick at reading Japanese, if you're fluent in Japanese better than me, you probably would be able to pick that up pretty quick. I did not notice that on first viewing, but yeah. I wanted to get that on my screenshots when I paused it and read through it. It's about the funniest thing in the world.
There's a lot of close-ups on Yui's handwriting in her notebook in here,
yes.
And I'm curious who at KyoAni did that because it's such a good performance of the character through her handwriting where you can just feel Yui in the written handwriting on the page. And I love that even if you can't read the Japanese, it's just so clearly her and the personality in it is awesome.
Yes, and all like the random, weird, insane doodles that she makes and stuff like that. And I love how like consistent that stuff has been across the whole series. All of her doodles, there's like a Yui style of doodling, and I don't know if there's one person at KyoAni that does it, or if they made like a Yui doodle style guide or something that everyone can follow if they want to do a Yui doodle in an episode. But it's very good. You also have a line here that I'm not entirely sure how this connects to the lyrics of the song, because it just seems like nonsense to me. But she also says Rice is super lost loneliness at one point, and I don't know what that's supposed to refer to in the lyrics. It makes no sense, but it's great.
Rice is super lost loneliness. I want to get a fucking tattoo of that on my forearm.
Yeah, it does seem like a thing that would be on like a Japanese T-shirt that is nonsense English, and they don't know what it's meant to mean, but they're like, oh, it's probably cool. I don't know.
Love it. Love another night sequence, and there's this shot, you have all the shots here, of the transition into day over this like industrial area of London. Fucking gorgeous set of shots there with the clouds changing in between each one. Really beautiful. The whole feeling of like them getting up, being groggy, getting ready for the performance. That's another one of those KyoAni focusing in on this little in-between moment of travel that feels very real. Even if you're not going to play a concert, you felt that definitely on like the last day of your trip.
Yes. And then you have them all, I think they're in the elevator in the hotel, and you have this great shot with the mirror where it starts on the reflection in the mirror, pans left to all of them in the elevator. And then as they're getting off, K-On! The movie, knows what it's doing because it visually quotes fucking Citizen Kane. Because then you have a shot of Yui's and Azusa's reflection reflecting infinitely into the distance in the mirror, like that very famous shot from near the end of Citizen Kane.
That blew my mind, because in Citizen Kane, you point a camera at the mirror and get the lighting right. Here, you just have to draw like 10 Yuis into the background, and you can tell it's like bespoke, individually drawn Yuis. And Azu says it's a really impressive little piece of animation.
Yeah, because it's that attention to detail of where you have the one side of Yui's face that's reflected in the reflection immediately next to her, and then you can see the other side of her face, which is the reflection from the mirror on the opposite side of the elevator that you can't see, that's being obviously reflected in the mirror you can see. And then so it's a kind of a double reflection that's showing two sides of her face, because she's not perfectly horizontal or perfectly parallel to the mirror, and so the perspective in each reflection is flipped from the other one, so it keeps on doing that infinitely into the background. Yeah, it's a really great shot. That in some ways it's in one way of it being animated and with that different kind of perspective of the face, it's more complicated than the Citizen Kane shot. That's one up on you, Citizen Kane, by K-On! The movie.
Well, it's one up in the primary reason, just because, again, they're not actually photographing it, they're drawing it. And so it is, like, again, there's obvious talent that goes into making that Citizen Kane shot work, but it's not a special effects shot in Citizen Kane. It is...
Yeah, it's just conceptual.
Yeah, it's conceptual and getting, again, the lighting and the focus right, and it's a very skillful shot, but it is one that you can do in camera. There's no such thing in animation, so it's, just one of those impressive... I think a lot of studios wouldn't even attempt that shot, and I know that because I've seen a lot of animation. I don't think I've really seen a version of that before. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, there wasn't anything in the travel doc that pointed this out or anything, but I have to assume that the elevator in the hotel, because they did stay at the actual Ibis hotel, like the hotel they stayed in that trip is the hotel that the girls are staying in. So I have to assume that the elevator in that hotel probably has double mirrors on either side, and that I have to assume that's where this idea came from, because you wouldn't do that for no reason, because obviously there's not like a very deep thematic reason why it needs to be there. I mean, you can conjure up a thematic reason of it's introspection and she's trying to find the lyrics for Oz's song and stuff, but it doesn't feel like a thing that they sat there and be like, we have to metaphorically represent all of this with the mirrors. It more feels like a happenstance that just works perfectly for the film.
Then we get the final, like the climax of the movie, which is here at the Little Japan Culture Festival, which is such a fun, weird thing they get to do, where you get to bring in like Japanese culture stuff like takoyaki and Godzilla, but in this London context. It feels like they had a lot of fun designing this sequence. I do particularly love the big like pink Godzilla man. I know you would adore that moment, Sean, but it's all very fun.
Yes, because it also, they use the actual Godzilla roar specifically from the Heisei, the 90s era Godzilla movies. So it's the real sound effect there, but it's a, shove the serial numbers off version of Godzilla. But my favorite, like, I love the Pink Godzilla. Pink Godzilla is great. My favorite thing is the old British dude with the mustache who's dressed in the, like, full samurai armor with a fucking eye patch of just, like, chilling out at the pop culture festival. That's my favorite part of this whole sequence, because I want a whole movie about that dude's fucking life. I want to know, who is this dude? Where did he get this? How did he start? Because my headcanon is like, this dude, it's old school. He's been into this shit since, like, he was a kid in, like, the 50s. And he looks at all the anime stuff. And he's like, no, that's not it. It's like, I've, read the Heike Monogatari 500 times. And like, I want to know this whole dude's life, because he's a real one.
It's wonderful. I like to think he organized this whole thing, and he's just sitting there taking it in. This was his pet project. Oh, it's lovely. And then, of course, we get the whole performance sequence where they're on the outdoor stage. And we have a kind of a deadline structure here, because they have to get to the airport by 5, but their show is at 4, which is a perfect, like, movie stakes setup to have. And this is where we get the moment of truth, where Yui is trying to plug in her guitar and is scared because of the like hair dryer she had earlier in the power converter. And who steps in to save the day and plug it in for her but Sawa-chan herself, in a kind of plot contrivance that you can get away with in the movie version of K-On! I don't think it would work in an episode, but in the movie version, go for it.
Hey, she had some extra miles left over on her credit card that are going to expire, and she's like, fuck it, I'm going to go from 11 to a day. I'm an adult. Nobody can stop me. It is absolutely a plot contrivance, but you can just believe it. You can just believe that Sawa-chan would be like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to go to London. In that very, like, young adult, I can do this. Nobody can stop me. In that same kind of decision you have when you're like, you know what? I could just buy a cake. There doesn't need to be a reason for me I could just buy a fucking cake. That's just the thing I can do, right? Like, everyone's gone through something like that.
Yes.
For her, I'm just going to go to London because no one can stop me. I am my own person now.
It's wonderful. And again, I think it's the kind of thing that you can get away with in the movie when you're coming up on the climax. And who do you want to see but Sawa-chan, who, of course, they all think is like a spirit that has come to them. And it's very funny. Honestly, the thing that made me saddest in this entire movie is that Sawa-chan put together, honestly, some pretty rockin' fucking costumes for the girls, and they don't wear them. That is the meanest thing anyone has ever done in an anime.
Yeah, Nichijou, she shuts that shit down immediately. You do get some great shots of Nodoka, Ui, and June in the ninja cosplay, and you do also get one random old British dude in the audience who, when he sees the lady ninja outfits, he's like, bravo! And he starts clapping, and he's just like, shut up.
Sawa-chan made those. She tried them out on the other girls. She flew all the way to London for this. Wear the outfits. Humor her. Come on. She does not get paid enough for this.
She does not get paid enough for this. That's very true. And then we get our concert, which also is edited together with a montage over all this, like, London scenery, which is now, it's like the sun is starting to set, and it's just gorgeous. All these different shots. It's so beautiful. Like, and just like lots of, like, little tiny things, like a shot of a couple who are sitting on a bench together, or like some pigeons in the park, right? And all this kind of stuff. And then members of the audience, you have, of course, like the little baby that distracts Yui at one point, causing her to do the extra verse on Gohan wa Ukazu, and going around again, inserting some random London references like the River Thames and shit in there. But I love all the imagery of London and the color of the sunset and all that going on here as they're jamming in this last little song before they have to leave. It's a very beautiful sequence.
Yeah. What are the two songs they play there? They do Rice as a side dish. What's the other one they play in that sequence?
I'm blanking on it. I don't remember what the other one is off the top of my head.
Yeah. Because I think that we get the bigger one for Rice, but they start with another song, I know.
Yes.
But they're both, because the other one is one I did not recognize, so I thought it must have been maybe one of the ones from the second album that we hadn't heard before. But I know we get another one of those in the classroom sequence later, so I might be mixing them up. But I agree with you about like all the color setting here, the whole, because this is like also just a cool thing that is true about actual concerts that happen outdoors, is the magical feeling of seeing day turn into night at one of those concerts is the coolest thing in the world. And I love how they do depict that with London. You can see the skyline. There's a bunch of great shots framed like through the London Eye, and you have Big Ben in the background. It's super, super cool. And you definitely worry for them getting to their plane on time. But hey, they have Sawa-chan to take care of them now, so they're going to make it.
Yeah, because this is also, there are lots of like, this is where they start stretching their legs a little bit more with more complex shots and stuff. Because there are lots of big like 3D rotational shots and stuff that go around them. There's that interesting shot that kind of starts this whole sequence where the camera comes in through the London Eye following I think a dove that's flying around. There's lots of stuff like that where it feels like this is kind of their showpiece in terms of more complex camera movement and stuff like that they can get away with the movie budget that'd be probably prohibitive to do for the TV show.
It is definitely the space though where you most see like, okay, this is definitely the point furthest out from their comfort zone, because we just see that so little, and they're the kind of shots that like Ufotable is still the master of those, right? Like those are not as good as like the Ufotable versions of those shots. There's a little bit more of like compositing the 2D characters into the 3D spaces isn't as natural as you'll see it in other places. It's still very good, and I think those are the kinds of shots that work, again, in a movie scenario where it's a little bit more heightened. You want to kind of free the camera up in a couple of moments there. You know, I'm glad that KyoAni has never really abandoned. I think their roots are very classical, animatic side view 2D animation. But when the moment calls for it, and I think this is a moment that calls for it, those are some good, especially on, I think, a kind of a conceptual storyboarding level, good uses of the 3D camera.
Yeah, and it just gives that whole concert a very different visual style compared to the one at the early in the movie and the one we're going to get after this. And then you get one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Again, another thing of where you just feel where the attention of Kaon is paid on the trip is how much attention is paid on the taxi ride back to the airport to leave at night, which is just an incredible little moment. Again, making you feel that sense of travel, because that's another just like puts you in that mindset of what it's actually like traveling. Not like the things you think of immediately when you think of trips you've taken, but the actual experience where that very interesting moment of where you haven't left yet, but you're about to leave, right? And you're not even at the airport yet. It's that taxi ride over. There's such a juicy moment of the trip to zoom in on. And I love the revelation of this moment where it starts snowing in London. You have this beautiful scene where the lights of the street lights they're going through change the lighting of the scene as it happens. Similar to, there's a moment, there are two moments throughout Haruhi. We looked at both of them where they do that. In that instance, it's them walking on the sidewalk and cars driving by and the headlights passing by. But the mastery of lighting in this sequence is amazing. Like, there's a shot of Ritsu looking at her camera that's illuminating her, and then that lighting gets flooded in with lighting from the outside. It's very, very impressively done, and just builds the atmosphere of this moment so much and makes it feel so tight and intimate. And I love that the revelation of this moment is Yui realizing, we don't need to make a big crazy song for Azusa, right?
Yes.
The whole point of them leaving, and the thing that Yui had the idea for, was like, well, we'll make the song and let's make this a worldwide song. We're going to go big. We're going to go crazy with it. And it's on the car ride back that she's like, hey guys, I figured out something crazy. We can just do a normal song for her. And all the other girls are like, yeah, of course. Like, did you just figure that out? Like, we realized that ages ago. Of course, we just want to do a normal song for her. And I love, it's the most K-On thing in the world that, like, really, in terms of the overall plot of the movie, in some ways, the trip to London was kind of pointless. In the sense of, like, a normal movie would have had a big moment where Yui has a revelation that's like tied to something specific. That would be probably something like, it doesn't have to be something crazy and special. Like, what we want to give Azusa is something that represents all the little moments and the lives life that we have like led together here and what that means for us and how much we love her. But that would be tied to something. That'd be tied to an event, a plot event. Here, it's not. It's just we went to London, we spent time together, we got into some wacky hijinks, we saw some fun stuff, and that's it. And that's all it needs to be. It doesn't have to be tied to a big sort of, second act. Our relationship is being strained because of the misunderstanding of she doesn't know what we're trying to do and we can't tell her to keep it a surprise. And that's causing all this drama. And then we realize, the real message is the friends we made along the way or fucking whatever. This movie doesn't need any of that bullshit. And it's one of the things that makes it very special. And it's all kind of revealed in this moment of that this is what the movie is about. This is what the plot of the movie is in the most K-On! Way possible, that the London trip isn't actually important in that sense, and yet it is the most important thing in the world.
That's exactly what I was going to say, and it's what I love about it, is that making the focal moment that quiet, ambient car ride home with that careful deployment of lighting is the most K-On! Thing in the world, and it is so special. I think it is such a Kyoto Animation touch to all of it. And it makes the whole London part feel all the more, I think, human and dynamic and vibrant and real. That, those revelations on the car ride home, that feels very true to life. And it is because K-On! Is not concerned with sort of big, contrived, dramatic plots. I think it can get to things, even in its sillier moments, that are very beautiful and real. And this is absolutely one of them. And then the final stretch of the movie here is essentially like one final episode of K-On! It's like about 22 minutes, and it is basically an alternate version of the series finale from the perspective of the senpai getting the song ready and doing their last little concert for their class.
Yeah. So you have the whole concert for the class, which is an amazing moment that obviously it's calling back to the second opening theme from the second season, where there's also the scene of them giving a concert in the classroom, and it's the same framing in some of those shots with all the students up front near the camera and then standing on the desks in the background is the same way that those shots in the second opening are framed. And I love that they're kind of like contextualizing that concert actually happened. And it's all them up there. Yui jumps into the audience and plays there and turns around and plays towards Azusa up on the stage, which I love.
I'm sorry. This is just the most lush piece of music animation they've done. It's incredible because it's not just all of what we're used to of they've perfectly synced all of the finger movements and all of the drumming and all of the keyboarding, but it is all that physicality that Yui has going into the audience and acting through that. She gets back on stage and they do the like a guitar duo, like solo together where they're playing off each other and all of that. It is so crazy cool to see. Like this to me is like the music sequence I kind of always wanted to see K-On! Build to, and it's perfect.
Yeah, it's amazing. And there's all these great little story beats kind of built in there where you have Sawa-chan thinks that they're going to get chewed out by this other teacher here, like she did by that teacher when she was a student at the school. So she goes to the school being like, I'm going to protect them. And there's a great shot where you have this great big wide shot of the school, and then she steps into frame and you're seeing the school like between her feet basically.
And she's in high heels too. It's like just such a perfect like power shot.
Yeah, I'm going to protect them. And then she gets to the school and she's trying to distract the older male teacher. And then he's like, aha, but I'm on to you. And I love that dude's physicality as he marches out of the room. And you know that he's goofing around the whole time. But Sawa-chan doesn't realize it yet. She's like grabbing him from the waist and he's dragging her. It's a great shot where it's a shot low to the camera and then she gets dragged through the camera, basically a kind of shot that you couldn't do with an actual camera because there would have to be an actual camera there, but she sort of breaks through the camera. Yes. And then there you go. A great shot of through the windows of looking that happen, and then the camera goes up. It looks at the second floor where the girls from the occult club run out of their club room with the Rosetta Stone replica that they have, that they just bring to this concert for no reason, but they just look at Yui and put their finger up, number one. She's like, yeah, number one. And I don't know why the Rosetta Stone is there, and yet it feels very important that they bring the weird Rosetta Stone thing there. And I love all the stuff of like Sao-chan and that sent the older teacher getting there, and she's freaking out, and he's like, oh, come on. Like, they're adorable. Not like you guys were back in the day, because their concert was this crazy heavy metal thing where they wrote the words Death Devil on the fucking chalkboard. So you could kind of understand maybe why in that context it would feel a little bit less appropriate. And Sao-chan remembers getting scolded by this dude, and then they get drugged in by all the other students that then bring them all in. And I love that little sort of the playfulness of all the stuff happening, the madness around this concert, and, you know, that we find a little place for Sao-chan in all this, because obviously she's not really the focal point for the movie, but I like that they built in these little moments for her to, like, you know, center her experiences a little bit more as well, because she is important to the series as a whole.
Oh, I love it. And I love the, like, relationship that is sketched out between her and the older teacher, where, like, they are colleagues now, but there's this weird scenario that's very real, happens all the time, that she was a student here, she has grown up, now she has come back to teach. They are technically on, like, even footing, but she's never going to be able to shake, like, this guy scolded me as a kid. He doesn't actually think of her that way, I think, right? Like, you get that sense, but she can't get that out of her head. And again, these are all background details. It's never the main focus of the sequence, but it is done so well, and I think it is a good... Because Sawa-chan's, like, big payoff is in episode 24, but I like that we get a parallel version of it here. There is even a little moment of her in the office looking at the big card that they all gave her in episode 24. But I think it's good that they built that into the movie as well, because she's still an important character here who deserves some closure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the concert ends. You have this amazing little scene between the four girls in the classroom afterwards. Love, you get a nice clear shot of the chalkboard that's been decorated by the other students, which is great, and has all this stuff of like, they're back from London, like their international debut, and all this kind of stuff is on there, and it's adorable. And you just get this moment of them all very reminiscent of episode 23 from the show of the where they're all spending that one last day, the last time they'll have after school together. And this is where Mugi then has her iPod, which is one of the things that very much dates this movie.
It's an iPod Nano. My brother called that out. It's like, oh, she has an iPod Nano. And it's like, it's the tall one. It's, yes.
Yeah, it's around the last time you'd start seeing iPods being in anime, because, you know, at this point, 2011, late 2011, almost 2012, you know, iPhones are a thing at this point. They're going to become more ubiquitous, but we still have some flip phones. We've still got iPods, and it's nice to see that. But she plays the melody for the song they're going to write, and everybody's like in on it and now committed. It's just like, yes, we have our plan. Like, this is what the song is going to be. We just have to write the lyrics. But I just love this little scene and the lighting, which is completely like kind of washed out here. And the sense of them, like, they've done it, right? They've like, we've done our big concert. We've done this big thing. Now we just have this one last step, which is finishing this song for Azusa.
And you get this beautiful little montage of them at home the night before, finishing the lyrics. They're all listening with their headphones in to the different pieces. There's that beautiful moment where Ritsu walks out by her brother and, like, ruffles his hair, realizing he's taller now. Again, just about the passage of time and all of that. They put their notes together and write it all at that cafe that we always see them at in the show. We get another shot of the sakura blossoms coming in, all of that good stuff. But Yui has this whole thing where she's like, the lyrics aren't quite right, and we get an earlier version of the angel lyric, but it's this, you're our adorable little kitten girl, and that's what she doesn't feel is right. And so then there's a final scene where they're on the roof together. Beautiful shot of them running across the roof that is incredible. Yes. And then we get a payoff to all of those images of the sky, where you have another vapor trail up in the sky, and you have a bird flying through it, and Yui has the idea that, we'll use the word tenshi, we'll call her an angel, and they all know it's immediately perfect. And boy, what a beautiful way to flesh out something that is there in the original show, and make it all feel so much richer.
Yeah, and it's such an amazing scene, because you have like all of them like running and shouting on the roof, which is great, and like that little moment for all the four original girls to be together and just be kind of idiots together on this rooftop that they've never been on. And I like that little detail, because it's like, it's the thing that separates K-On! From other anime. And like every other anime, students are always just on the fucking roof for no apparent reason at all, other than it's like a dramatic location for scenes to be. But my understanding is, and logic tells you, you're not normally students normally don't really have access to the roof at most schools in that way. That's like very like it seems like an anime thing. And I like that it's like, no, somebody left the roof unlocked and they figured it out. They're like, we can get on the fucking roof, come on. But the other amazing thing about the scene is, so you have Yui looks up, sees the bird up in the sky that's then framed by the vapor trail. And that's intercut with shots of Azusa, who's in the classroom. And at the same time, she's writing the notes for each of the senpai, which we see in actual episode 24 from season 2. And I love that intercutting of like, they're both thinking about each other. They're both thinking about this message we want to see, because she's writing hers for Yui. At that moment, gets up and goes and looks out the window, sees the same bird, the same sky, the same vapor trail. And then you have that shot of them, all the 4 girls on the rooftop looking up at it. And then that's then intercut with a shot of Azusa looking at her through a window with the camera outside the window with the vapor trail in the sky reflected in the window, which that's the one that like feels like a Tako Noriko shot, because that's one of those things in the original Cloud episode from Clannad. That's one of those really prominent shots of the cloud was reflected in a car window looking out at it. And so it's just such a beautiful way of framing all of this. You then have Yui is explaining the lyrics she wants to add, and she sings it to them. And they're like, yes, let's do it. And she looks up at that vapor trail and then creates a triangle with her hands to frame it, which is another just sort of amazing shot. But this whole sequence is just sublime. I mean, the editing, the imagery, the color, the animation, the framing, everything about every single shot in this sequence is just absolutely perfect and packed with so much emotion and so much meaning and implication about how the editing is working, showing you these people and what they're all looking at and what all of them are feeling about each other.
Absolutely. And another thing I want to praise the movie for is, we've all seen the kind of anime movie or OVA that revisits a moment from the series, but kind of depends on you having known it, and so it does not kind of complete the narrative gaps. One thing I like about this is that while there are moments from the finale that are not repeated here, the movie works on its own terms. Like, that scene is fully paying off things within this movie. Like, elements of it, like Azusa writing the notes, I think are richer if you've seen the finale. But even if you haven't, on this movie's own terms, her writing the notes communicates something to us. Them doing all this stuff with the song is a plot that has been set up and paid off within this movie. And but the one thing I was worried about as we got near the end is, are they going to elide the actual performance of the song? And they don't. It's a different take on that scene, because it winds up being this whole scene with this montage of kind of memories over their high school career. And I think it's a very beautiful, evocative version of it that's different than what we get in the finale, but it means this movie does get to close the story on its own terms and never just feels like a companion piece for the show that you have to like fit in the pieces yourself. I think it works as a 110-minute movie really beautifully, and that's so cool.
Yeah, it's able to do both these things, right? It's able to both be a companion piece to the show that enriches your understanding of this scene from the show and gives you another perspective on it, while also being a thing that pays off the story told in this movie on its own terms. And it's able to balance both those tasks perfectly. And yeah, let's just talk about that sequence at the end where they sing Tenshini Furatayo, Touched by an Angel. And I love... Because this is something where I've never seen this scene. This is not like, since this is not a gag, I had not seen this clipped out. So this is something I legitimately was curious about watching the movie. What are they going to do? Are they going to do the performance again? Are they going to sort of like gesture towards it but not recreate it? Because it's such a perfect scene in the TV show. I just couldn't kind of conceptualize, how do you do it? At a certain point, I was like, I wonder, are they just going to show the scene from the TV show like as the exact same? Because honestly, that could probably work. But what they do is genius, and is like the thing. It's the most K-On! Thing in the world. But right, they do start doing the song performance, but then it sort of moves into this interesting kind of temporal space where it is showing scenes of the 4 girls as they're trying to write the song, and they've been practicing it in the lead up to all of this, in like the weeks and stuff beforehand when they've been working on the song and trying to come up with it. And that's like edited so that them practicing the lyrics of like, there's a moment where they have their first version of the lyrics, and Yui is passing the notebook around to the other girls who are then singing the different parts of the verse that each of them has, and that's timed with, in the actual performance that's really going on, them singing those verses, right? And so it's kind of this interesting way of editing together this montage that's sort of transcending time, that it's conflating these moments of them practicing with this moment right now of them playing it for Azusa, and then that's also intercut with all these scenes of Azusa as she's at the school in her last couple of weeks, when, right, this would be set when Yui and them have finished their schooling because they're done, they've gotten into college, all that stuff, but there's a certain amount of time where the younger students are still taking classes, right? So while all that is happening, you see, oh, they were running around, they were writing the song, they were practicing all of this stuff. You get these scenes of while Azusa's at school, they're like sneaking around. There's this great little moment where Azusa's in the club room and she looks down and there's like a donut or something, or like an eclair that's in a box with a note for her from Yui that says Azunyan, and it says like, it's delicious, in a little writing at the bottom. And she picks it up, and then in the background you see the four of them peeking in through the window. So it's like you see them, right? It's what they've been doing the whole movie. The whole movie is them trying to find a way to convey what they feel for Azusa, but keep it a surprise, and so she doesn't know. And representing all that, of all the work, all the time, all the emotion, all the feelings that they have put into this song, that it's not just a thing they came up with in a day. It's not a thing they came up with in a night. It's a thing they have worked on weeks for. It's what the whole movie was about. And representing that through this montage, it's so incredible. And I think like the emotional weight of it is so tremendous. And I've never seen a scene quite like it, of the way in which they use the like cinema technique of a montage in this way of sort of conflating this current moment in time, but showing all the weight that this one moment of time has because of all the preparation that has happened, and sort of using those as a sort of like synchronous moment in storytelling. It's genius. And like, I was tearing up when this was happening, just of like the idea of how beautiful this is, of all of the effort that they have taken into this moment being represented so artfully in this way.
Absolutely. You know, I wouldn't change how the TV show did it, because I think that's the right ending for the story the TV show was telling and the right framing of it. But like, for a revisitation and seeing kind of the other side of it, and this being about the effort that the other four girls, the senpai, put in because of how much they love Azusa, like, seeing the weight of that, it truly is tremendous. And having those two scenes together as two sides of the same coin, just, I think, emphasizes that this is like one of the best endings to any anime I've ever seen. And this is an alternate view of it that is, if anything, even more powerful, because now we're seeing it very holistically and all the sides of it. And you're right, as a piece of editing, it's extremely masterful and so carefully timed. And there's so many good, just seeing like the girls in like different, like sometimes they're just wearing these like white hoodies. Sometimes they're in their like school uniforms. Sometimes they're in their winter clothes out practicing like down kind of by the riverbank. It's all beautiful and it's all so perfect. And the way it comes together there at the end is stunning. And then, because I think the movie is right to intuit that you can't just quite end there, because that is also the ending of the show, they build a little coda in too. And that coda, I love, it's the senpai walking home from graduation. So a little bit after, this is the only part of the movie that happens after the show. This is the latest point in the K-On! Timeline. But I love that there's a long, long take that is just on their legs from like the skirt down as they're walking home. And what a piece of animation, because you can tell who each character is from the performance of their legs, including the one who is walking backwards through the whole sequence to look back at them. Oh my God, it's a stunning little piece of animation.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, but you're 100% right. Like, you never, even though the only thing you're seeing is their legs and like their shoes and socks and stuff, you at no point are you wondering who is who. Right? Like when Yui starts talking, you're like, oh yeah, that's the one who's in the front who's turned around and walking backwards. Yeah, it is a pretty incredible piece of animation there. I also want to highlight the other, I think, really smart choice they make, which is they don't show you Azusa's full reaction to the song, which is in the show, right? So it's like you get her clapping, and then when you have the moment in the show, which is amazing, where she says, man, you guys aren't that good, huh? Like they shoot that scene from the outside in the movie. You're looking in through the windows and you see her say it and you see the reaction to it. But if you never saw the TV show, you wouldn't know exactly what was said. But of course, for the context of this movie, you don't need that moment. That moment's more important for the TV show, and for like Azusa responding to it, because that's all Azusa's perspective. I think it's kind of an interesting way for the movie, for what they're doing, a movie that's about them creating the song and giving it to Azusa. Azusa's reaction's not actually that important, other than like her liking it, right, and her clapping. But you don't need anything more detailed than that. It's like, it's so much about delivering this message. Like, the details of exactly how she responds to it aren't what the movie's about. And I think it's like one of those like very interesting but very smart calls to say, that moment is for the TV show. We don't need to, there's not another way to do that moment. There's no other way to shoot it or frame it. Let's leave that for the TV show, back out, and then create this little moment with the legs and then walking backwards. And then it pans up and you see all four of them. They start talking about like, what are we going to do next year? Next year for Azusa's graduation trip. Are we going to go on what for Azusa too? It's like, of course we are. And then Yuichi pretends to be a plane, outstretches her arms. Then you have that big wide shot of the bridge, and you see that there's like Azusa, and I think it's probably Yui who is also on the bridge, or Ui, and Yui sees them and runs up, and like the last moment is her jumping up to like tackle them, and they're like, what the? And then that's when it fades into black, and you get the Oshimai, the end on the screen with all like the little stars and stuff, the same way they ended season 1 and season 2, and you're like, perfect. It's perfect. It's a perfect ending. Somehow, the show or the series has 2 perfect endings. They had a perfect ending in the TV show, and then they did the same timeline, but is a different perfect ending for the movie. And it's like, that's a hell of a feat, because there are lots of series that have like tried to do something where it's like, we finished the TV show or whatever, now where there's like another movie and we're doing more with it, where they fucked up the ending that they had. And here, they didn't fuck anything up. They did the ending again, and they made it even richer, and they work in tandem so perfectly with each other. And it's like, that is a hell of a balancing act that lots of series have not managed to pull off.
I would argue they actually have 3 or 4 endings, because season 1 has an ending, because you also got to remember, there's no guarantee there'd be a season 2, right? So season 1 has a really perfect ending. Season 2 has the episode 24 ending, but also the last episode broadcast, episode 26, which is them running through the halls, all of that, and on their way home. And then that's kind of referenced here as well, with her running across the bridge with her arms outstretched. So yeah, this show has ended quite a few times, and they're all tremendous 10 out of 10 no notes perfect endings.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So, all right, what else do we need to say about this movie? Oh, I have one thing in my notes I need to say. We glossed over the best English joke in the whole movie, which is Yui calling Azunyan Azucat, which is a great term, Azucat. And then there is a pun that the subtitles on the version we were watching, at least, completely ignores the pun. And it's too bad, because it's really funny. It's this moment where they're all in England talking, and I don't even think it's Yui. It's one of the other girls says something that in Japanese sounds like the word Azucat, and you see Azusa like perk up for a second and go, what? And the movie and then moves on. And it was like such a blink and you miss it moment. My brother was like, wait a second, was that a pun? And I went, what was a pun? And we rewound, and I wasn't even looking at Azusa, because she's not the center of the frame. And it is just this off to the side joke that is the payoff to the Azucat thing. Fucking love it.
Yeah, because there's 2 things there. Because there's one where it's the Japanese verb azukeru, which is to like give to someone, or to like give to someone to hold on to, and they kind of reconjugate it using like that kind of cat sound. So like it's like azukato skeru or something like that they do. So they sort of like play with that verb, and it keeps on happening, and it's a running joke where each member of the band ends up using it. And Azusa by the end is like, what is it like? It's like this becoming viral or something like that is kind of what she says. And I forget what the exact phrasing is, but there's also the moment where they're translating the lyrics from Gohan wa Ukazu, and there's it's the phrase mushiro in Japanese. I forget how Mugi translates it, but it's like better, more than as, or something like that. And Yui says, better, more than as nyan. And that starts to get Mugi to crack up because she made an Azunyan pun, and Mugi's just sort of quietly laughing for the rest of that scene. So yes, there are lots of great Azuket or Azunyan puns. And I don't know how I forgot to mention, and when they're on the airplane, that when they start speaking English, she translates Azunyan as Azuket.
Yes, but it's fairly literal. It works. You can also say Azu meow, but it's good. Quickly, do you want to tell us about the music from the movie? Because you had some notes on this as well.
Yes. So one, I just want to shout out the score of the movie overall, Hyakukoku Hajime, who the scores for the K-On! Shows have been fucking phenomenal. I think it's even better here because obviously there's it's a whole original score for the movie that is doing redone versions of some of the themes from the show, including one of my favorite pieces, which is when they arrive in London, it does a version of the Tea Time theme, which is the same one that's on the Next Time previews and stuff like that from the TV show. It's that, but on bagpipes, and it's the fucking greatest thing in the world. It cracks me up so much whenever I listen to that song. There's also lots of music when they're in London that are making really nice sort of musical sort of homages to various English bands. So there's a track that is doing an homage to the beginning of Strawberry Fields Forever. There's a track that's very clearly an homage to the Led Zeppelin song Over the Hills and Far Away. So there's lots of little pieces of London musical ephemera that's spread throughout the soundtrack here, along with lots of good original music, more in the traditional style of K-On!, as well as lots of interestingly redone themes. The song that plays in the car ride back is just beautiful, and it's a reinterpretation of a theme from the show. So hats off to Hyakukoku Hajime for all of that, because the whole soundtrack of the movie is amazing. You also have some of our new songs. So we have Ume wa Endless, which we talked about a little bit. That's the song that plays during the big montage, which is also the kind of theme song or the promotional song for the movie that's played from the trailers. This was composed by Tom Hack, who did all the opening themes from the show. The single for this was released that had on the B-side was Ichiban Ippai, which is the song that is the actual opening theme of the movie that plays in the opening montage. That single debuted at number 5 on the Oricon charts. And Ichiban Ippai is also, that's a Tom Hack song that is arranged by Hajime Hyakukoku. And that opening theme is incredible. But then, of course, we have our sadly, our final Mio theme for the ending, which I love, that the end credits start playing on a black screen, and you're like, it can't end here. We haven't had a weird Mio music video with a fucking kick-ass song by Maezawa Hiroyuki yet, and then she rips the fucking credits out and then starts playing her song, and it's amazing. And so there's a song called Singing with an exclamation point, and this single debuted at number 4 on the Oricon charts, and you have this great, it's just a fucking amazing song. I don't know if it's necessarily quite as good as the 2 ending themes for season 2, but it's very close.
Oh, it's of a piece with them, at least. I mean, it definitely, it scratched the same itch, where these are my favorite songs in the show, are all the Mio end themes, and they're some of my favorite bits of animation with the crazy music videos, and I just love that we got a whole new one for the movie. That is the ultimate treat on top of the sundae that is this film.
Yes, they knew that you gotta have it. You can't end a K-On! Thing and not have a big, crazy, weird music video with Mio singing a cool, fucking kick-ass rock song. You also have a song that's a song I've really loved for a while now, but it's only been on one of the albums. There's a song called Samidare 20 Love, which is a song from the second Hokago Tea Time album, and this never actually played in the second season of the show, which is when the album was released. But they play this during the concert in the classroom. And the Hokago Tea Time albums are the ones that are the songs that contextually are meant to be played by the actual band in the show. They're not the ending themes that are obviously way more heavily produced. And I really liked the Samidare 20 Love song, and I was very happy to hear it actually make it way into the series, because it's very good. Because I think there's one other song, I can't remember what it's called. There's another song on Hokago Tea Time 2 that was never actually used in the show or the movies. It's also very good. But the music across the fucking, because then you have obviously redone versions of a bunch of the other songs in the different concerts, and we've kind of talked about all of those. but it is definitely a musical feast because you have a lot of music, and it's a much, much higher concentration of the music and the musical performances and stuff in here than you get in the TV show. And it's very welcome because the music for the series, as much as the series isn't really about music or musical performances in the way that other series like Love Live or Butchie the Rock is much more about that kind of stuff, still, they put a hell of a lot of effort and got some really amazing composers that are very experienced in the sort of J-pop music industry world to make some absolute fucking bangers again and again and again. And it's very appreciated to just be able to enjoy those, some old classics and some new classics for this movie.
Absolutely, and I think it's a big part of why I said this is, I think, my favorite K-On! Thing is the movie, is just that slightly higher concentration on the music just makes the balance kind of perfect for me specifically. I also just want to shout out, this is Naoko Yamada's first movie that she has directed. She did 4 at KyoAni. With this, the Tomoko Market movie, Liz and the Bluebird, and A Silent Voice. And we're going to talk about at least 2 more of those, Silent Voice and Liz and the Bluebird, on this season. But, we're in 2024 now, and she has 2 movies coming out this year. She has her feature film, Kimi no Iro, which she directed. It is written by the same writer that did this, Reiko... What's her name?
Yoshida Reiko.
Yeah, Yoshida Reiko, yeah. So it's another reteaming of those 2, and that is coming out later this year. And then she also has a short film she made that is apparently more avant-garde called Garden of Remembrance that's played at a couple of festivals, but will be coming out to the public this year as well. So this is a big year for her, because she works at Science Saru now, which is kind of a big up-and-coming studio. People might know them. They did Scott Pilgrim anime that just came out on Netflix that is really acclaimed for good reason. It's gorgeous. But she made the Heike story with them, but now she's got these films coming out that are original projects. So definitely something we will be following on Japanimation Station in some form in the future, because her career is going in interesting directions. And it's just cool to talk about it here because, K-On! As a show and then as a movie is her first big, solo directorial effort. And not many people can claim to have something like K-On! Under their belt as their initial directorial effort.
No, yeah, certainly from like a artistic and kind of critical perspective, but also from a commercial perspective, like K-On! is and was a phenomena for a reason, and yeah, Yamada Naoko's debut thing is pretty insane.
Yes.
But also I think it's worth to take a step back and also admire for other people for whom this is not literally their like debut, but in some ways kind of is, which is our main voice actresses, all 5 of them for whom this was their first leading role. And that's one of the things that really struck me when I watched the recording of that premiere where you had the 5 girls and Yamada Naoko, you giving like a little thing. It's like a short, like 15-minute sort of thing where they each say a little bit about their character and stuff. But it struck me about like, right. I mean, all 5 of them are voice actresses I know very well now for lots of things they've done since. But it's weird to think about like, right. I mean, at the time they were unknowns when they were cast in the original K-On! Show. And it's like you feel the weight of that when they're talking about what they knew at the time obviously was going to be their last big K-On! Thing. There were no plans to continue it. They obviously haven't continued it since. I'm sure there have been like weird commercials or like, I would not be shocked if there was a K-On! Pachinko machine out there somewhere that Toyosaki Aki did some new recordings for. They're the kinds of characters that you're going to pop up every once in a while for a little project here or there, but it's their last sort of big thing together. And you feel the weight of like, man, this is a thing that like set off and defined the careers for 5 voice actresses, all of whom are like huge pillars of the modern voice acting industry. And it's really wild, but it's wild how each one was a home run piece of casting. I mean, all 5 of them are just incredible, give incredible performances, and have only gotten even more impressive in their careers since then. And it's something to sort of, it's one of the many things about K-On! That is just incredible and makes you kind of mind boggle with all the different things that came together to make this series.
I think that's a good place to start to wrap up because, yeah, this is the end of our K-On! Discussions. Obviously, there is no more K-On! To review unless we wanted to dive into the manga, but we're Japanimation Station, not Japanimanga Station. And yeah, this show was a revelation. I knew it was beloved. I had high hopes for it. It sounded like the kind of thing that would be my cup of tea, slice of life plus some cool music stuff. I always love that kind of thing. But I really was consistently across the TV show, both seasons, especially this film, really blown away by this, and just, I'll go back to my old refrain. We watched Clannad, and I went, well, it's not getting any better than this. Season's downhill from here. Not downhill, but you know what I mean. I was like, we're not going to see anything as good as Clannad, right? And then we see Haruhi, and I'm like, well, Haruhi has rewired my entire brain's expectations for what television is. We're not going to see anything as good as that, right? And then K-On! Is like, well, fuck, this is just unfair now. This is just, how do you rank those three? I have no idea. Lucky Star was in there too. That was pretty damn good. Air's no slouch. Canon had some good stuff in it. KyoAni's got some good stuff, and we're only about halfway through this season, Sean.
Yeah.
So, man, and again, the stuff that we have coming up, Nichijou, Sound Euphonium, Violet Evergarden, I'll just say, those have a bit of a reputation behind them. There's some weight to those titles that I'm excited to hear about. And I'm psyched to keep moving forward here in 2024 as we complete the second half of Japanimation Station's Kyoto Vacation.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say, as with everything that we have watched, my appreciation for this show has just, I mean, I always loved it, and had always sort of regretted that I'd never finished watching season 2 for various reasons, and had always been meaning to get back to it. And I'm so happy that I finally got to finish it out. But there's also part of me that's sad because there was a part of me that kind of left K-On! Unfinished as there's always more K-On! Out there though, right? And there's some things like that in my life where I'm like, I have this show or this thing I really love, and sometimes I don't finish them all the way, or when there's a new thing that comes out, I kind of leave it in the background. It's just it's a break in case of emergency, and I need more K-On! That has always been there, and it wasn't necessarily an emergency, but I broke that glass, and now I'm done. I can rewatch it, but there's no new K-On! There's no K-On! I've not seen.
Have you read the manga yet?
I've not read the manga, but I don't know if that's the same thing,
It's not, but it is not to. You're not saying that to discredit the manga,
no.
Just that the anime is its own specific confluence of talents and motion and visuals and all that. Yeah. No, I understand what you mean, but boy, I'm so happy we did it. I'm so happy we got, as with Haruhi and Clannad, getting to watch it and talk about it is a much richer experience than I think just watching it on our own. So
yeah, and it was a thing I was very curious, because I knew that K-On! Was, in terms of plot and that kind of stuff, obviously thin relative to certainly something like Haruhi that is just fucking insane. So I was curious, what is there, how much will there be talk about? Will there be enough to talk about for the podcast? And every time I have that concern, it's proved wildly dumb, because we always have at least 3 hours to talk about. We can keep going if we needed to. But I think this is where we can leave it for movie. K-On!, one of the just all-time great movies, one of the all-time great series. But there is more greatness to come, because next time we are moving on to part 4 of our Japanimation Station's Kyoto Vacation, where we're going to be looking at 2 very special shows. The first of which, what we're going to watch next week, I have been multiple times on record as declaring as my favorite comedy I have ever seen, ever. So the superlatives are going to keep coming here for a while here on Japanimation Station's Kyoto Vacation. Next time, we're getting part 4, My Ordinary Life is a Mystery to be Lived, featuring Nichijou and Hyoka. And that's right, get ready for some fucking wacky-ass nonsense, because next week we are covering Nichijou, My Ordinary Life.